check, check. Hello. Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to our preparedness seminar on hurricanes and EMP. Let's begin with a word of prayer. God, we thank you that you are in control, that you hold the world in your hands, that you hold our future, and that we don't know what the future holds, but we know that you hold it and that you're in control so that we can rest in that. So, Father, open our eyes and our hearts. May you show us what preparations we personally need to take individually and even corporately, Lord. What is it you're calling us to? May we not operate out of fear, but may we walk in faith. And as a result, the deliverance comes from you, not from our preparations, not from knowledge, but from you. So, Lord, this time is yours. Have your way. In Jesus' name, amen. One of the verses, there's a lot of great Bible verses talking about trusting the Lord, and one of my favorites, of course, is Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding or preparations, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. He'll make your paths straight, the translation says. Proverbs 22:3 says, the prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. We live in Florida. Hurricanes are a way of life, and it's foolish to think that, well, it's no big deal. If you've lived here for any length of time, you know that things get crazy, and it starts in 2 days, hurricane season. So today we're going to talk a little bit about hurricanes, and then we'll take a break, and we'll come back and talk about EMPs. The preparation, actually, for the two events are fairly similar. To what extreme, to what degree. So you do have a handout there, and we'll refer to it at different times. So when it comes to hurricanes, how many of you have lived through a hurricane here in South Florida? Okay, so pretty much everybody. How many of you have lived in South Florida more than 10 years? Okay, almost everybody. Oh, actually, with the recalculation, yes, you're okay. So, how many of you lived here at least was here through Wilma? Who was not here through Wilma? Okay, a couple of you. My son wasn't even born yet during Wilma, so that was in his case. So, if you lived through Wilma, that's a major hurricane hitting here and facing the results. Without power for a couple weeks, and yet, thankfully, even in that, we were spared tremendously. How many of you were here during Andrew? Okay. Boy, you guys are old. So I was going back and I was just pulling up some things. Andrew was an expensive hurricane and a lot happened. Katie, can you run the slides for me? Actually, I forgot. Maybe I can pull it up on my phone here. And let's see what happens. Okay. It looks like I can control it. I have the power today, at least for right now. 2004 was an interesting year. We hadn't really had a major hurricane hit Palm Beach County in years. I think actually a major hurricane hit, a direct hit. And of course, there's a big difference between a glancing blow and the actual eye wall hitting us. I remember we moved down here in 95, and there were a number of hurricanes that came through, and we got used to it. It's no big deal because they came through. We got hit by a hurricane, big deal. And then we had, I can't remember what the name of the hurricane was. It was like 98 or something, and it was a Cat 1, and the actual eye wall came through. I remember going out during the eye, and it hit, and we heard the storm and everything, and then of course we hear the calm when the eye is passing, and us and all the neighbors are outside. We're looking. It's like, what the damage, and whoa! And it was amazing because there really wasn't a whole lot of damage. Lots of trees and stuff down, and then the wind started to pick up. Like, okay, better go back inside. We came back inside. That was a Cat 1, and I had a tree that was 6 inches not the trunk, but in the middle, completely just snapped, flipped over, and sat on the other side of a wall. And I was like, whoa, because we'd had 4s and 5s that had passed by. But it depends on what quadrant you're in and all those details. But when you have the direct hit, it's massive. Well, 2004, Florida had Charlie, Jean, we got hammered. We had 4 hurricanes that hit Florida, direct hits, and most of it in Central Florida. Those that were on the West Coast, Charlie, and there was another one that was, I think it was whatever it was, a B name, I think. But then we got hit with Jean and Francis, and I can't remember whether it was Jean or Francis that just sat off the coast for a whole day and just get water and water. Well, and we thought 2004 was, it was a bad year. But then 2005, that was Katrina, $125 billion in damage. We had, 28 named storms. They had to use 6 letters of the Greek alphabet because they ran out of names of storms that year. Okay, so things can happen. $182 billion between Wilma and Katrina. So Wilma, hitting us, Katrina hitting them, New Orleans. 2017, $295 billion in damage that year. 17 named storms, 10 hurricanes, 6 majors. And then in 2000, and one of those hurricanes in 2017, that was like Maria. I had the list. It was Maria and Irma and Harvey. 60 inches of rain in Houston in 4 days. That's like, I'm just barely over that, okay? This much rain in 4 days, where does it go? Where does it go? And of course, Houston was, virtually destroyed. Now, one last one I want to mention, and that is Dorian, which destroyed the Bahamas. But if you look at this hurricane map, it just sat right off the coast of us for a day. It was headed for us. Category 5, 185 miles an hour. We've not had that hit Palm Beach County, ever. Okay, so we can look at the pictures, and of course the Bahamas, literally I can't remember which island is just basically destroyed, and even now they're still doing the cleanup. We have been blessed in that we've not had a major one hit, but it could happen, and so we need to prepare. So, what does preparation look like? Well, it starts, it actually starts now. I have a tree trimmer friend, and I had him come trim my trees, and it was about a month ago, and he's trimming them, and he said, I'm doing the hurricane trim. And I was like, what's the hurricane trim? It's like you intentionally trim things back a lot, and you intentionally take off all the coconuts, because of course those are missiles when the hurricane season. I was like, oh, thank you, and he did that last month. But if you have a lot of trees, it makes sense. I share my neighbor, I live on an acre, and we have this huge line of Australian pines, 100-foot tall when I moved in, okay? I mean, these are big trees. And his shop is on the other side of those trees. And we moved in 4 years ago, and he said, how about we work together and we top those trees and just take them down a little bit so they don't fall on my shop? And I was like, sure. And so we started that. It was a big day, it was like 4 guys with chainsaws and a lift truck, and I was basically pulling the things because I don't know how to use that stuff, the chainsaws. But they were pulling this stuff off, and it happened to be 3 weeks before Irma. We had no clue that Irma was coming at the time, but we were just doing it because it was preparation, and he didn't want it to hit his thing. Irma, I had a huge, big cypress tree that Irma just took out. Those Australian pines at 100-foot tall could have landed on his shop. And so anyway, so those kinds of preparations that we all need to do, and just figure out, taking a survey of your landscape around your house. What's likely to be a target? And of course, it's a good idea to have a chainsaw. Daryl. Those of you that don't know Daryl, this is Daryl Price. Daryl's been
Hi guys, I know most of y'all.
Leader at church for years here, and he's a guy that been through a lot of hurricanes as well. So Talk to us about water and food.
Yeah, been through a bunch of them. And I mean, if you look at this, we dodged a bullet like you can't even imagine. If Dorian had come over and hit Palm Beach County like we were in that eye, it would have devastated us for months and months. And that's what we really want to talk about today. I mean, even though we haven't had one, we want to be prepared in the event something like this happens. And it's not all that unlikely. I don't know what the probability would be, but there's a pretty good chance that something like this could happen. So, and we don't want to be the people that are freaking out right before it comes out there in the stores where, we see the pictures where there's no water and there's no gas and there's no this and there's no that. If you do your preparations now, when we're not in the cone, everybody loses their minds, you won't have that fear, you won't have that worry. There's plenty of supplies right now. You can go and you can find AA batteries and Ds. As soon as that cone comes, there's not going to be a D battery anywhere to be found. You won't be able to get gas cans. So this is the prudent, good steward of your resources right now, is to go and get prepared for these things. So imagine if that had come, you'd probably lose power. I lose power for 2 weeks no matter what happens. Where we live, I don't know what it is. We're always on a very unimportant grid. I plan on losing power for at least 2 weeks. So when that happens, we're on a well system. I have no water, and I have no electricity, obviously, for the refrigerator. So the first thing I'll talk about is water, because that's pretty much the most essential thing. This is a great little device. It's called a Sawyer Squeeze. And with this, you can drink, if you had to, water from almost any place. Your little retention ponds and canals. I've gone on hiking trips, and if you saw the water we were drinking with this, you'd be amazed. And it's good for like thousands of gallons. So this is something I highly recommend everybody should have. And if you have this, worst case scenario, there's usually plenty of water around Florida. We don't live in a desert. There's canals and lakes everywhere. You will be able to get it. Another good tip is they always say to fill up your bathtub with water. There's no reason to not do that. Then you have extra water for washing, and you can even use your toilet. You can, pour water down your toilet to continue using that. And then the obvious thing is to go out and buy water. You can buy gallons. In the past, we bought, those big 5-gallon bottles that go on the, I'm not sure what you call them, the water cooler, the water cooler. There's companies that'll just bring it right out to your house, and you can order 10 or 15 or as many of those as you need, and then you don't have to worry about drinking water. I think the rule of thumb is a gallon per person in your family per day. So I would figure at least a 2-week scenario. You know how many people are in your household. You can do the math, but that's something you don't want to have to worry about, and you really shouldn't, Any questions on water or other comments on water? Yes. I don't think it works in salt water, that's...
All right, it'll work in salt water. You just have to clean it. And the main thing is after you use it, you got to clean it.
Yeah, but this will take salt out as well?
Yeah, it will. You'll still probably have a slight residual taste, but the Sawyer is pretty amazing. I think it filters up to 1 million gallons. So, and they make a mini and they make a regular. I recommend the regular. The mini means that it has a very small. It's like basically sucking out of a straw. This, you fill the bag and then you turn it upside down and then you squeeze the bag and then water comes out. But if you can imagine squeezing the bag through a straw, it'll take forever. Like we went for a hiking trip and it took us 45 minutes to replenish our water supply. And that was with the fast one, okay? Now, granted, there was 10 of us on the trip and I'm squeezing bottles and, So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and they're amazingly simple to use. You literally just fill a bag with the dirty water. You screw on this filter and you squeeze it into your container and it's ready to go. It couldn't be any easier to use. Great thing to have. So, anything else on water? Any questions? Yes. I'm sorry.
Bleach. She said she was talking about using bleach to purify the water.
You know, I've never done that, but yes, they do say you can sanitize the water with bleach. I wish I knew how many
So-
drops that was, but there is
Yeah.
a certain formula you can do to put bleach in your.
You can add the
water, yeah.
bleach. The thing you have to recognize is that bleach, after 6 months or so, it loses its potency. Okay, and so you can't just store bleach and think that you're good. You gotta keep the fresh bleach. But a certain amount of bleach is great to kill any bacteria. Now, they recognize if you're pulling water from other sources, you may have other contaminants. And the worst case scenario, you filter it with a sock, and you'll get the big stuff out. It's still going to look discolored. You add a couple drops of bleach or iodine, and that's another ways to go.
Best thing is to store some water on hand, but we don't know in the event of something like that. I don't know that we'd be able to store enough water on hand. So there is a point where you would have to go and start filtering water potentially. And it's good to know how to do that. And this little filter thing makes it really easy. If you have that, you don't really have to worry about it past that point. Yes? It does, yep. Yeah,
Well,
pretty
life
much.
straws are great. Actually, they were on sale. Costco's selling. Kevin showed me was it a 5-pack or a 6-pack? 4-pack. It ends up being about $12 per life straw. Life straws are great. Think of them more like individual use, like you would use them for this hurricane or for this person. Once again, because it's you personally sucking it up, and so you can drink out of the pond or the canal with that life straw. But just think about a straw. You don't necessarily want to share that straw with everybody in your family. So that's why it's good to have like a 4-pack or something. All right, we'll move on to food.
So food, I mean, obviously the big disruption here is we lose our power and all the poles are knocked down and FP&L is not going to be able to get them up for a long time. So it's good to have food that isn't going to spoil. The stuff in your fridge and your freezer, you may have a generator and you may be able to keep that going, but you also want to have some food that is going to be shelf stable that you can keep for a considerably long time. That doesn't require a lot of preparation either. I mean, think simple foods. You're going to be in a hot house. You might not be able to, if you do have a generator, you can hook it up to your stove or something like that. But the grill has always been my source of, if I had to cook something, that has saved us time and time again. You can boil water on it. So start thinking of foods like that you just can simply either, peanut butters or pastas, things that don't require refrigeration or a freezer that can be easily prepared, that you don't have to also clean up 100 pots after. Because if you don't have a sink and running water and you have this, you made this big meal, now you have all these pots and plates and things like that to clean up after. You want to keep your meals nutritious and simple as far as that. And a good thing to do sometimes is, you can take some food and you can put them in these bags. We did another seminar on that. We'll get a little bit more into this when we talk about the EMP. This is more of a long-term storage solution. But like Ty said, these two events are kind of similar. So if you have this other stuff on hand, it's there, whether it's a hurricane or an EMP. So it's good to keep some foods in stores like that aren't going to be damaged by insects or rodents or weather conditions. Any questions on food preps? And I think, again, you want to think about 2 weeks. Figure how many people that you are caring for and what they would need to get through at least, I would say, 2 weeks before you can expect any help to come in and help you. Yes. They are. I've been surprised. I'm in the same situation. I have those things, and they just sit there. And I've never had one not work. I don't know what the actual life expectancy is, but I've been very impressed. Yes. There are times, especially if you get the propane tanks from a very inexpensive source, they sit on the shelf for a couple of years. They can very, very slowly leak. I've never had a Coleman tank leak, but I've had others. But those little Coleman stoves are great. I mean, we use those all the time. And I'm a big coffee guy. I got a thing of coffee up here now. They sell those little camping coffee things. And I mean, sometimes it's just nice to have a cup of coffee in the morning, even in a hurricane situation. It kind of makes my day not seem quite as bad, even though the power's out and it's hot. If I can start my day with a cup of coffee, that seems to make all the difference in the world for me. So there are little camping stoves, and you just put the grounds and water in, and you can enjoy your coffee still. Yes. Small butane stoves are fairly inexpensive, $25 or $30, and the canisters of butane are a couple dollars. Yeah. They sell them at the Asian stores because they tend to want to use it for a walk because they use a lot of heat. Hmm. The other thing about coffee is I use a French press all the time, and you don't have to worry about heat. You can do a cold brew. Yeah. So, coffee lovers, stock up on your coffee. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. I mean, you guys have all been through hurricanes before. I don't think this is anything that's, earth-shattering news to you that we need food to survive and you're not going to have your refrigerators. But the big thing is, now is the time to start chipping away at it. The other thing is if you wait till the last minute and you have a family of 6 and you have to get 2 weeks worth of stuff, it's a lot of money. So it's not only are you out there scrambling with the crowds to grab whatever you can get, it's a lot of, money all of a sudden, where if we prepare now and every time you go to the store, you pick up a little something extra, when that time comes, you won't be so frantic. You won't be so nervous. And that's really what it's all about. The Lord has not given us a spirit of fear or of worry. And if we take steps now, we won't have that for us or our families. Yes.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, well, we'll do a little bit more of that because that long-term storage is more for the EMP situation where it's unfortunately potentially much longer than 2 weeks that you might have to figure out food. Yes.
All right. Next, we're going to move on to preparations for your house. And of course, my first time, the first hurricane, we were down here a year and a half, and the first hurricane comes through, and you may have heard me tell this story before. Everybody's helping put up plywood, right? So I'm going out to the store. I don't have a truck or anything, but somehow I've got plywood strapped to my car, and I'm driving home, and I've got the plywood, but I don't have the tools. So my friends come over, and they have the tools and the Tapcon screws, and we put up all the plywood. It was great. I was prepared for that first storm. The storm blows by. It was nothing. It was the time to watch movies until the power went out for an hour, and, that was it. Well, then I didn't have the tools, so I sat in a cave for the next month. I was looking for somebody to help me. I was like, yeah, I'm busy. I'll come next week. And I finally got a screwdriver and by hand undid all that stuff. And I'm like, never again. And so I immediately went out and bought hurricane shutters, the accordion shutters. That was my first house, and that was, probably 2002. And we spent, $6,000 on hurricane shutters, which at the time was a lot of money. Today, you're going to spend a whole lot more. The house that we just bought, we've been in this house here in Lake Worth for about 4.5 years, and the windows were bad when we moved in, and we knew we were going to have to replace them. We're going to get the hurricane windows. So we went ahead and got the hurricane windows, but it was a $17,000 price tag. So the nice thing is, I don't have accordions. You know, it used to be with the accordions, in 10 minutes, I could completely button up my house. And so I could help others, which is a great thing. You know, it's a beautiful thing about hurricanes and disasters is the community coming together. And so we have that opportunity, especially as believers. We need to be out there helping our neighbors. But we can't help our neighbors if we haven't taken care of our own home first. That was the other thing I loved about the accordion shutters is that I wouldn't close them until the last second, because I knew I could close them at the last second. So I kept the window, the air, the light coming in and everything. I was helping everybody else. Okay, the storm is about an hour away. Okay, boom, I'm closing it and I'm good. I would say now with the hurricane windows, it's nice because you can watch the storm go by. It's a little bit freaky when things start to move around. You're like, is it going to hit me? But it is worth the investment, and there are incentives. You can actually there's pros and cons of doing it, but I forgot what it's called. But you can actually finance it so that you pay for it through property taxes. It can go on your property taxes. There's pros and cons to that. There are lots of companies that want to sell you. The biggest thing, if you are going to do hurricane windows, impact glass, shop around. The prices I got were, like the $17,000 was the cheapest. I had prices that ranged up to $30,000. And am I really getting that much better of a product? When I compared apples to apples, I really don't think I was. It's just that there's a huge markup on that because of fear. And now that we're in hurricane season, it's going to be there. How many of you have hurricane impact glass? Okay, only two. And my son. I'm glad you have it too. But I recommend the shutters. If you don't have the shutters, here's the deal. Plywood is 6 to 7 times what it was a year ago, okay? I'm told, I haven't looked, it used to be like $15 for a sheet of plywood. It's now $80 for a sheet of plywood. And here's the reality. If a storm comes, you want to cover those windows, because remember, the thing that happens, if the windows break, the air can come in, and it literally, if the storm hits it the right way, the right angle, even if it's not a direct hit, the wind can literally lift off your roof, okay? And then once the roof goes, the whole house can go kaboom. So it's important to keep those windows intact. Taping the windows and doing those things really doesn't do anything. You want to have some type of protection. Now, you don't necessarily have to protect every window. You only have to protect the ones that are going to get hit. Which, of course, is funny because you don't know which ones are going to hit. But the smaller the window, and like, for example, I had a 0 lot line. And so my first house, and so that 0 lot line, I knew that, well, this window, the chances of it getting hit were next to nothing because I had another house that was like right there. And so the ones that are important are the big ones, the sliding glass doors and so forth, which are the biggest pain to get covered. So have a plan to protect your windows.
I just had a question. Do you guys all have shutters or some type of protection? You're all at a prep
Not everybody.
Seminar, no?
Okay. It's worth the investment to do something. Even the panels, which they're one step above plywood, okay? In terms of protection, they're better than plywood. But in terms of the hassle, they're such a pain, and you get carpal tunnel just screwing all those panels in, but they're better than nothing. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. They're a step above it. And yeah, that too. Well, and then usually there's, if you have a high windows, it's like the high windows usually get skipped. So best, I prefer the shutters or spring for the glass. Right now, the last price I saw is you're looking at about, for a small window, hurricane glass, you're looking at about $600 per window. For larger windows, almost $1,000. For sliding glass doors, a regular 8-foot wide sliding glass door is going to be $3,000 or more. So if you want to calculate, hey, I've got 20-some windows, you're going to have a $30,000 price tag. PACE, yeah, that's the program. Yeah, so that's the beauty. That is a good thing. If you need to stretch your dollars, you can finance it, and it goes into the PACE program, and it just becomes part of your property tax. You pay it once a year. So check into it. But once again, you got to weigh the pros and the cons. Sometimes if you have it's an encumbrance on your property tax bill. And if you have that, sometimes that can, if you're planning on selling, I wouldn't do it. Like, if you're planning on selling the next couple of years, because it can make the number of buyers for your home reduced, because not everybody can like, I think FHA may not be able to do if you have a PACE thing. There's little details, so just make sure you research that. Speaking of hurricane prep for your house, basic repairs. Do those basic repairs now. If you've got something that's kind of blowing in the wind, fix it. If you've got air coming through your house because, well, you got things that have rotted away, those are the things that are going to be stressed and attacked. Right now, through June 6th is tax-free time, and so a lot of hurricane preparations are tax-free. Now, it's a weird calculation. It's like tarps that are $100 or less are tax-free. There's no tax on flashlights valued at $40 or less. Portable self-powered or two-way weather band radios at $50 or less are tax-free. So it's like these lower budget items. As far as I know, like the generators and so forth, which we'll talk about in a little bit, are not tax-free. But take advantage of it now through June 6th. Do it. Now, one of the other things in terms of your house is having preparation for, you protect the outside, but then on the inside, what are you going to do? One of the things that I did is a couple years ago, actually right before Irma, I bought a little portable AC unit. It'll cool off 700 square feet, cost me about $200, and as long as I had a generator or something, I could run that little AC thing and keep the place cool. Remember, hurricane season begins June and goes through November, right? The big months are August and September, okay, the high priorities. Those are also some of the hottest months in Florida. And it's the worst thing when you're without power. That means you're without AC, and it's like 85 degrees in your house. And if you haven't been able to take the boards off, that means you don't have the windows open, and so you're just dying. You're cooking. And having that little portable AC unit was like, it was beautiful. And it's funny because our little guest house, the AC went on it last week or 2 weeks ago, and I just cranked that out, put that in there until the AC guy came the next day, and they slept. My tenants slept through the night and had no problem. So that's a great little. I think I paid about $200 for I think it's a 10,000 BTU unit, which does the job. Along with that, so thinking about something, having fans, you need to have some fans, and you can power fans relatively easy. And I remember one of the first hurricanes, the one guy had a generator, and there was two neighbors that had extension cords plugged in so that we could at least have a fan. And so I was plugged into his generator for that. Another thing to consider is the sanitation, and that is eventually, like when a hurricane hits, you still may have water flowing, at least for a little bit from your faucet, but then eventually it will go. You won't have water, okay? So that means you can't flush the toilet unless you have another water source. So if you have another water source, you literally just can pour water into your toilet and it will flush the toilet, and that will last for a little while, but you may need to find something else. This is a little portable toilet. It's called the toilet bucket. It is literally just a 5-gallon bucket with a fashioned toilet seat, okay? Now you can, if you're really cheap, you just buy the toilet seat that's designed for the bucket. It's about, I think it was like $15 on Amazon, or you get the whole thing for, I don't know, I can't remember if it was $20 or $25. The idea is that you put this, it comes with liners, but you could literally put in a garbage bag. You put in the garbage bag, you do your business, you close it up, okay, because it's gonna smell. You close it up, and then you empty it out every day or whenever you need to empty it, but there you've got your own toilet, and you don't have to figure out where to go when you gotta go. So,
Ty, could you give us a demonstration on what that would look like?
You just sit on it.
I knew he would do it.
Now, you could do this without the toilet seat, but it's rough, okay? So having that little $12 toilet seat is worth it. And like I said, I actually have two. I have one that's just the toilet seat, and then I have one that's the full deal because I wanted to have them both because I'm weird that way. Kevin. Yes, great point. Yeah, so you want to have it lined first with the bag, but then yeah, put in some cat litter or some sawdust shavings and different things. We've got chickens, so we got the all the shavings. You just throw that stuff in there. So good point. Other questions on sanitation or the house preparation? Well, the buckets, yes, you can get buckets lots of places. The lid, though, these are I got it on Amazon. Has this thing? Okay, there you go. There you go. Yeah. So does Walmart have the whole thing? A regular bucket. I mean, here's the deal. If you have, if you did painting, and I got this old bucket, you don't need to have a special bucket. It's just a, it's situated for a 5 gallon lid. So if you have a 5 gallon bucket, any 5 gallon bucket will do. But the nice thing to have that little seat to make it a little easier for you. Sporting goods camping. That's a great idea. And for our for the recording, I just want to mention it. So it's a pool noodle. Taking a pool noodle, you can cut that, and so that it sits on top and make a little cushiony seat. So, which is great. And she's also mentioning keeping the solids separated from the liquids because that's what helps um, um, eliminate some of those odors. Okay, so you can neutralize the smell with chlorine bleach, or vinegar. All right.
You guys are really experts on this topic. I'm a
I
little
know.
surprised, actually.
This is great. This is great. All right. Next thing I want to talk about is security for your house. And the idea is, first of all, I mentioned the windows, and honestly having hurricane windows is a great theft deterrent too, because it's very difficult for a person to break through the window to get inside your house. Okay, and especially if you've got those doors. I had a friend. He's got a beautiful door, and then right beside it's the glass pane on the right beside the door. You've seen those. He had people break that little glass pane and just walk right through, robbed his house. If you have hurricane windows, it ain't gonna happen. It's a lot of work to break through those windows. So security-wise, it's also good to update the security of your doors and your locks. The reality is, if there was a major storm hit, especially if people have fled, then you think about Irma, a lot of people left. Unfortunately, there are people in society that are like looking for opportunities. If the house is empty, it's a target. And so after the fact, and so doing those things to set and protect your house with security in that way, firearms, pepper spray, having a dog, the different things. We've had a whole seminar on firearms, so we're not going to go into all that here. But it's wise to be prepared and have those things ready in the event that something does happen. Things get dicey afterwards. If there is a major storm, 911 is not a phone call away anymore. Okay, and so we need to be ready for that and prepared for that. All right, bring the power.
Power. All right. So, like I said, we've lost ours every single time any hurricane comes through. We're 2 weeks without power. So we have a generator. We went out and we invested in one of those after the first time we went 2 weeks without power. They're wonderful. The one thing I like to say now, like now's the time to go out and buy your food and water. Now's the time to dust off your generator. If you made a mistake and you left some fuel from the last one sitting in there, that fuel is now bad and you need to drain it out, and you need to get that thing started and make sure that it works. You don't want to have the power go out and then all of a sudden realize that your generator isn't working. Fuel only lasts, I don't know, a couple months. I'm not sure what the thing is, 3 months, 4 months maybe. So if you think you stored, if you have, gas in your cans from last hurricane season, it's not good. It's not going to work. You're going to be in trouble. So make sure that you have your generator in running order. I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm going to go do that this weekend because mine's pretty old. I've been really fortunate so far. I put the stabilizer in it. Usually, I drain the old gas out, and it's lasted me probably 15 years now. I'm not sure what the life expectancy is, but it's saved our bacon many times because if you have the generator and you have extension cords, that's another thing you want to make sure you have to run. We've kept our refrigerator going. You can run a light and you can run a fan. It really changes your world if you are able to have access to electricity. You would have to hire an electrician, but you can hook your generator into your circuit panel, and you'll be able to actually run, depending on the size of the generator, you'll be able to turn things on in your house and not have to have the extension cords run all over the place. I know my dad just had that done, and he's pretty well set now. If anything happens, he can just flick on whatever he wants to run. He can even run his air conditioner. Then you also have to process how much fuel you'll need to run the amount of amps or watts that all those different appliances are going to take. My generator only runs on gas, but I guess the newer ones are running on propane, which seems like a pretty good thing because I don't think propane goes bad. You could have canisters of propane. Obviously, maybe I shouldn't say obviously because you hear the story every single year. You don't run your generator inside the dwelling because of carbon monoxide. You hear a terrible story every single time one of these hurricanes comes through. Somebody didn't know about that, or they'll put it in the garage or someplace on a porch that they thought was safe. And then carbon monoxide gets in, and you don't realize you're being poisoned by carbon monoxide, unfortunately, until it's too late. So safe generator use, keep it outside, and don't run it indoors, obviously. Other things to consider for power, like we talked about, was the grill. I love to have at least 2 of those propane tanks filled. And again, now's the time to go and fill up that extra tank or 2 that you have and just keep it in your garage or someplace safe. You're always going to need it. Even if you don't need it for a hurricane, there's nothing worse than being halfway through your meal on your grill and you run out of propane. So now would be the time to go and do that. Solar, I'm not a real big solar expert, but certainly that would be a wonderful thing. I'm not really sure how solar works with hurricanes. If you have them up on your roof, I don't know if you're supposed to take them down, but
No, you leave them. Kevin?
I've been watching a lot of videos on YouTube. The power banks are really, really coming down in price, and there are actually setups where they give you a foldable solar panel, and starting at about 500 and up for a small system.
Yeah, I just bought.
People use them for camping.
Yes.
Power their whole RV with solar.
So in terms of solar panels, there's 2 different approaches. One is the whole house approach, which we'll talk about more in the next hour. The other is just the temporary panel. So you can get 100-watt. Like I literally purchased it last night because I wanted to put it in my Faraday cage, which we'll talk about. It's a 100-watt foldable thing. It folds up so it fits inside of this, and it's about $200. You can get one for about $200 to $300 that does 100-watt, and then 100 watts charging, and then you get the battery bank that then stores the power, and then from that, then you can run all sorts of things. And like I got a package. Actually, I got a package deal. Now that I think about it, I was shopping for a while. It was $350, and I got a 350 watt storage bank and a 200-watt solar panel. Okay, and it takes like, I don't know, 6 hours or whatever, and it'll charge that, and so then I'd have that much power to charge whatever devices and things that I needed to charge, or to run a fan. I could have spent twice as much, and I would have been able to go up to about a 500 watt. And then the thing is, it just keeps going, depending on how much you want to do. But the reality is, if you're looking at 2 weeks and you want your basics, having something simple so that, hey, I have my phone, I have, a refrigerator gets a little bit harder, but you can do that. Even if you get the refrigerator charged, maybe it's only enough power to charge it for 6 hours. That's probably enough to keep things in there from spoiling, or at least spoiling right away.
Yes.
A couple of things. I'll touch on the solar thing. The battery technology has come a long way. There are new batteries out that are extremely efficient. A lot of these gel cells that we're used to seeing are at best, 60, 70% efficient. They're very lossy. The newer batteries are like 95%, and the number of times you can recharge them is way up there. So I'm not going to go into the details, but the worst thing you could do is like take a solar panel, charge a bunch of gel cells, and then run it through a power inverter to make 110 volts so you can run everything on. The power inverters are terribly lossy as well. So you're wasting a lot of your power just in the conversion process. Your best bet is to have a battery bank that you can plug in like USBs, where you're not doing any conversion, you're just some voltage changes. You're not trying to convert it AC to DC and back and forth and losing all of that. So
yeah, like the battery bank that I had AC plugins, USBs, a bunch of USBs and AC plugins, so that I didn't have to do that. Just the solar panel charges the battery, and then I plug it in, whatever I needed.
The other thing is on a generator, a lot of these generators, like anything else, they kind of run on demand. The more you pull from them, the more gas they're going to use. So just because you got a generator and, hey, I can run the whole house, you're going to be just feeding that generator gas, which may be in short supply. So even if you have a generator, use it. Think of yourself as a minimalist. Run as little on it as possible so that thing isn't swallowing up what could be a very valuable resource called fuel. So, and the same goes for propane or gasoline.
You can easily go through 4 gallons an hour with a generator, just idling, which sounds like, okay, no big deal. Well, that means in 24 hours, you used almost 100 gallons. So it's not something you just, I've got a generator, I'm good. Not unless you've got your own Shell gas station that you're plugged into.
I did buy one of those power banks off QVC or whatever, and it was pretty good. I tested it out. It ran a medical equipment for only 24 hours because it was pulling so much draw. But recharged it, threw it in the closet. I have no idea what the wattage is. I just know what the price was. But yeah, I think maybe next time I will get solar panel rechargers.
And that's the thing. Like some of these battery banks, you literally can plug into the wall and charge it before the hurricane. And then when the hurricane hits, then you've got that charged up and ready to go to power the medical devices or whatever you need. If you have the solar, most of these battery banks will take a solar panel that they'll interface with it so that you just plug in the solar panel and can charge. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are places, Harbor Freight, others. The thing you have to consider is sometimes you get what you pay for. And I don't know about, Harbor Freight. I'm like, I was shopping last night and I'm comparing, but I'm also looking at reviews. I'm also looking at the test results. Just because it's the cheapest, sometimes that means when it's crunch situation and I need it most, it's not going to help me. So if with Harbor Freight, I would be looking and I'd be researching online to see, is this one going to do what I needed to do? And the reality, most of them are made in China regardless. So other thoughts?
So like you said about the gas, I mean, another big takeaway, rather than being the person panicking because we're in the cone and there's lines at the station and what are we going to do? If you were to start buying some extra fuel now and you have a safe place to store it, this would be the time to start doing that. I think we're going to be entering June, July, August, September. I think anything you purchased now, the gas would still be good all the way to September. So now's the time, or shortly hereafter, go get some fuel tanks and be prepared to run your generator.
All right. In terms of other, like you said, propane does not go bad. So propane's a great alternative. I got a 500-gallon propane tank at my house because I wanted to be prepared. Now, like I said, 500 gallons doesn't do the whole house for very long. Okay, it sounds like a lot. The cool thing is you can get it buried. I will say one thing about propane, because I did that shopping. If you're considering that, because propane doesn't go bad and because you can store it indefinitely, there are places that will not charge you for the installation of the tank, and they will give you an introductory price. So basically, they don't charge you for the tank, but you got to buy the propane from them. Okay. When I crunched the numbers, the first year it was like, oh, I'm going to save tons of money. But you basically have to be like on a 5-year contract. By the time you do the 5-year contract, you paid more than double had you just bought the tank yourself, and then you can choose who's going to fill it. Okay? So cheap-wise, yes, you can get in cheaply through these companies like AmeriGas and others that will lease you the tank, like, for $1 a year or whatever. They're leasing you the tank. And if they want to remove the tank, then they can remove the tank. But they do all the permitting and all that in the installation, which is great. You just pay whatever it is per gallon. And the price of propane is roughly, right now in the neighborhood of the gasoline price, maybe a little bit lower actually than gas. And it varies. But the bottom line is, when you want to crunch your numbers, you want to ask them, what's the introductory price, what's the refill price, and what's my price next year? And I was shocked that the price next year was double. In other words, like, I think at the time when I was shopping, the price of propane was like $2.12 a gallon. And my introductory price was going to be like $2. They're charging me less than what it actually is. I'm like, how does this work? Well, my price next year was going to be $4 a gallon. I'm like, well, wait a second. That's how they make their money, okay? And at $4 a gallon, a 500-gallon propane tank costs you $3,200 because you can only fill up to 80%. Wait, did I do that right? $1,600. Sorry. So you want to be prepared. All right, know what you're getting into. The other thing too, in terms of power, is batteries. You make sure you have enough batteries for all your devices, flashlights especially, and all right, next thing I want to go on to is your car, just because I've seen people do this. Hurricane comes, they've got their house prepared, they've got their landscaping done, but they park their car under the tree, and the tree goes kaboom, and now they don't have a car. I am like, just be wise. Think about your neighborhood, and recognize, flying debris can come from anywhere, but a tree limb, it's not a good place to park your car. Last thing in terms of stuff, and then we're going to take a break, is communications. If the power is out, it's possible that cell towers are down, likely that cell towers are down, maybe not all of them, but some of them. It's good to have radios. We did a whole session on communications and radios. I encourage you to review that, talk to our ham expert, Dave, and find out, get a radio, get up to speed, so that at the very least, you should have one of the, I recommend these hand crank, this is a little hand crank solar powered weather radio, emergency radio, so that I can, if something happens, I can listen to it. I can listen to the radio. And you can get these for $20, $30, $50 on Amazon or at Walmart. This one is great because I can hand crank it. So literally, if there's no sun, I just sit here and crank. Now you got to crank a long time, but basically it through magnets and so forth, it's charging it up so that I can listen to it, and it's tuned to the emergency broadcast channels and in other channels. So it's a great little device, and then it's got a solar panel on the back that I could charge that way. So great great device to consider having. Okay, that's it. And
Actually, I
communication-
just thought of two more things real fast.
Go for it.
When you mentioned cars, one of a weak point on the house is also the garage. So, unless you have those hurricane-rated garage doors, that's an area you want to consider and make sure they're shored up. Either by, I usually park my car in front because we have the old plywood style garage doors, and if something were to blow through there, then you have that pressure drop and you got the wind in the garage, and bad things happen at that point in time. So you want to think about securing your garage doors. And then also medications. If you guys are on any type of medications or things like that, obviously you're going to need to consider that and have an ample supply ready, at least a minimum of 2 weeks.
Along with that, one of the things that we wanted to finish up covering was when to leave. Okay, my attitude was always, hey, we can get through this. I trusted my house that even in a major storm, I was going to be okay. Now, depending on the type of house, if it's a wood frame, is it, are you in an apartment? Are you in a mobile home? If I was in a mobile home, I'm not going to stay through a major hurricane. I'm going to find somebody to go to hang out with. During Irma, it was really interesting. As Irma's approaching, remember it was a Cat 5. It was one of the largest storms ever, and it's headed right for Florida. And everybody's saying, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. And I'm like, we're staying. I've got, in case there's disaster afterwards, I want to be here for the flock. And so my wife was convinced, she was on board, and her brother, who works in emergency services in New Jersey, is like, when are you guys leaving? And we're not. He's like, you're not leaving? You're crazy. This is a Cat 5, blah, blah, blah. And just going off. And he works, this is what he does. He works for FEMA, and he does recovery. And so he was off the chain talking to her like, you got to go, you got to go, you got to go. And of course, at the time, this is going back 3 years, we had young kids, like a 2-year-old, and all these, and she's like, I understand you staying, but I think for the kids' sake, we need to go, because if we lose power for a couple weeks, and then I thought of not being with the power for 2 weeks with all my kids. And she said, she was like, she wants to go. She's like, she wanted to go. As he said, if you stay, that's fine, but I'm going to go. And I'm like, I didn't feel comfortable her driving by herself. But she was going to go to visit some friends in South Carolina who opened their house. And so I finally decided, okay, this is at 10 o'clock. The storm is supposed to hit like the next day. So, or at 12 hours, 24 hours away. And so this is at 10 o'clock at night. And we're like, well, we could leave tomorrow morning. And I'm like, well, the turnpike is going to be crazy. Even though they've opened all lanes going north, it's going to be crazy. So we decided at 10 o'clock that night to leave. We started packing everything up. We left at midnight. It was the irony was at 12:05. We literally were just down the street from our house. My adult son, calls us. This is at midnight. He never calls us at midnight. He calls us and says, "So what are you guys doing? Are you guys staying or going?" We're like, "Well, we decided at the last minute to go. We're actually on the road." And they're like, "We'll come with you." And the place that we were going was actually is the guy's house that had been his youth pastor, and he's living up in South Carolina. So it was funny that we were all caravanning up to South Carolina, driving through the night. And by driving through the night, you do avoid a lot of the traffic. If you go when everybody else is going, it's a disaster, and then it's really scary because you get stuck on the road. Now, yeah, there's different things regarding that in terms of preparedness, and the pastors discussed it, and we've decided that we would always have at least one pastor stay in the event that many are fleeing, but most of the pastors would stay. But there's various situations you need to decide for you and your family what you need to do. and what approach you're going to take to that. All right. All right. We'd like to talk a little bit more about EMP because I think that's what most of you are here for since you've been through many hurricanes. We're going to take a 10-minute break and we'll talk electromagnetic pulse.
And just one last thing, don't forget your furry friends during hurricanes. You know, you might not be able to get them food and the stuff that they need, so consider all your pets and taking care of them. Yes. Cheap RV. Sounds good.
There are a lot of great websites and YouTube channels, and I know Prepstetter is one I've watched, but lots of resources. So I hope this is not your only stop. This is just basically a stop to kind of get you oriented to the different options. Pastor Michael has something to share.
Hello, everybody. If you've been to our past preparedness seminars, you know why I'm here. Right now, our youth are doing a car wash outside. We are raising funds for our Costa Rica mission trip. We are close, but we're not there yet. So we got kids working hard out there. If you'd be interested in letting us wash your car while you're in here in the nice AC, we would be happy to do that. And then by the time you're done, hopefully we'll be done with your cars. So that's what I have. Unfortunately, no sweets this time around. I know, I'm sad too. I don't get any unnecessary sugar for my body.
All right, we'll come back at 10:20. 10:20.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. And if the stars were made to worship so alive, I can see your heart in everything you made. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. And if creation sings your praises, so will I. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. created, light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Well, you lost your life so I could find it here.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to talk about EMP, electromagnetic pulse. Some of you may know what that is. Some of you may vaguely know what that is. I've got just a couple of little short videos to show you that this is not a little thing we're talking about. And here, we'll start with this.
Asked during the debate to name the security threats that worry him, Newt Gingrich lays out 3 scenarios: a weapon of mass destruction in an American city, a cyber attack, and something many have never heard of.
Electromagnetic pulse attack, which would literally destroy the country's capacity to function.
An electromagnetic pulse attack, or EMP. It's been the stuff of fiction on the Fox show 24.
It's an EMP!
But it's also a real threat, experts say, and it likely wouldn't look like that. An EMP attack, they say, is an intense burst of electromagnetic radiation. It can be triggered by detonating a nuclear weapon at high altitude, a weapon that could be launched by a rogue nation or a terrorist group with access to it. Detonated low to the ground, atomic weapons have a devastating physical shock. But detonated miles up in the atmosphere, experts say, the main impact is electrical, energy that doesn't kill people but spreads like lightning, striking any electrical grid or circuitry, feeding into them, burning them out. Whole cities could go dark. Security analyst James Carafano has written about EMP attacks. In one single event, what could be disabled?
If you had a large-scale EMP event in the United States, everything would be disabled, because even things that weren't knocked out, let's say your car, which might be okay, but the electrical grid's going to be gone. There's going to be no way to do traffic lights. There's going to be no way to land ships. There's no way to get fuel to the gas stations to refuel your car. And if you got them there, the gas pumps wouldn't work.
Think of this fictional attack in the movie Ocean's 11. We demonstrated electromagnetic interference on a much smaller, less threatening scale at the University of Maryland, showing how magnetic fields from some electronic devices often interfere with other devices. You hear this ringing behind me? We're showing you what electromagnetic interference is. Say this television is a car. The car's function is rolling along normally. Here's a cell phone ringing. When it gets close to that, you can see how the audio of the television signal changes. You can hear the interference. That's essentially, it's interfering with the car's function. But with a large-scale EMP attack, experts say, computers would fail, telecommunications cut off, bank accounts inaccessible. They say that's because the transformers that power many electrical grids take a long time to manufacture and transport. And with transportation knocked out by the attack, that prolongs the isolation. Brian Todd, CNN, Washington.
All right, you can keep the lights down for a sec. So basically, what we're describing is something that is the effects much like a hurricane, except that there's not the physical devastation, just that we lose power. I mean, we take power for granted. We use it every day. Right now, you're enjoying the benefits of power, and that we've got cool lighting, we've got videos, but most importantly, we've got refrigeration and AC and all these things that provide our food. The food that you have came because of power that got it here on trucks and so forth. So we don't realize how dependent we are on power. Now, a lot of people say, well, this is just unlikely to happen. Ted Koppel, and news anchor, retired news anchor, wrote a book, I think it was 2015, and here's just a little interview about his book and the seriousness of this.
Thursday marks 3 years since Superstorm Sandy made landfall. The disaster left millions in the dark in places like New York and New Jersey shore. Heat and light did not return in some cases for nearly 2 weeks. But what if terrorists go after our power grids? Emmy and Peabody Award winner Ted Koppel investigated. His new book is called Lights Out. We're pleased to welcome him to Studio 57. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Charlie. How are you?
Good morning. Good to see you here.
Good morning. Good morning. I spend every morning with you guys. The three of you in a bowl of muesli. That's how I start my day.
In a bowl of what?
There's no better way.
Muesli.
Yes.
He prefers a high fiber breakfast, is what he's telling us. That keeps you regular.
That keeps it. That's it.
Now, let's start with the book. Are we now talking about something? It's not a question of whether, but when.
That's exactly the way that the four-star general who commands CENTCOM put it. He said it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. The Chinese and the Russians already have essentially cyber time bombs inside our power grid. They probably won't use them because we and the Chinese and we and the Russians have so many interconnecting relationships. But if you start thinking about the Iranians and the North Koreans and groups like ISIS, they are all developing the same kind of capability, and they wouldn't be restrained the same way that the Chinese and the Russians.
You know what's so frustrating about the book? Because as you point out, it's not a question of if, but when, that we're not prepared. Reading your book, it was very frightening to me how little prepared we are.
What scares me, Gail, is the fact that people in government, I mean, Leon Panetta, when he was Secretary of Defense, spoke about a cyber Pearl Harbor. The president, twice in State of the Union addresses, has warned about this kind of thing happening. When you ask, however, what the government's preparations are for the public in the event that something like this were to transpire, and we would be potentially tens of millions of people without electricity for months at a time.
So are they saying they don't view it urgently?
What I'm saying is there's no plan. There are plans for hurricanes, there are plans for snowstorms, there are plans for earthquakes. There is no plan for a cyber attack that would be infinitely longer in duration and more widespread than any of those natural disasters.
You went and interviewed, you sat down with the head of Homeland Security.
I did.
Secretary Johnson. What did he say when you asked him about the plan? The lack of one.
He pointed up at a bunch of white binders in his office and he said, I'm sure there's a plan out there somewhere. And I said, well, don't you think it would be smart to get that plan out to the public before there is a massive break in electrical power? And he said, look, I mean, this is a relatively simple thing. You need a radio, you need a battery-powered radio. My question is, when the power goes out, what are we going to tell people on those battery-powered
You even used the word that he got a little prickly.
He did get a little prickly, yeah.
Ted, I just want to say, we did also reach out to DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, and we got a full page of details about what they would do in the case of an attack. And they said, you know, how they'd coordinate with FEMA and local officials, that they're working with the private sector for more resources in support. I think to your point, if the lights went out, it's more than just the lights. Explain what could actually happen to people if there's a massive cyber attack.
Well, in a place like Manhattan, for example, if the power goes out, you know how the fire department and the police spend the first couple of days? Getting people out of stalled elevators. You're talking about a community of, what, 8 million people? The food in a place like Manhattan would run out in a couple of days. New York State has several million MREs, meals ready to eat. But when you take several million and you divide it by 8 million, you're talking about maybe a 2 or 3 day food supply. What happens on day 4? What happens on
who
day
in this
10?
country is prepared?
Well, the Mormons are prepared. I spent 3 days out in Salt Lake City with leaders of the Mormon Church, and they showed me everything. Well, I don't know if they showed me everything they got, but they showed me a great deal. They are extraordinarily well prepared, not for a cyber attack. Mormons, after all, are people who have been driven from pillar to post for 200 years in this country. They have made a culture of preparing for disaster. They're ready for it. Most of the rest of us are not.
But you point out in your book that for the first time, the government needs to worry about...
Do you ever let this guy ask a question?
No, but that's all right.
Come on, Gail.
That's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm teasing you.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Gail reads. Gail reads your entire book, page to page. Look at her notes.
I know.
She reads the entire
book. Go ahead,
book.
Gail. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that.
How long are you staying here?
How long?
I was really looking forward to talking to you, Ted Koppel. I was so excited about the book. Okay, but let me just ask you this. Because you said for the first time the government needs to worry about the internet being a weapon of mass destruction.
Absolutely.
But you also say, how do you prepare for something when you don't know where and when it could come from? Because it could come from anywhere.
What I'm suggesting is we need to prepare for the consequences of a cyber attack. It's not enough just to say, yes, we know it's going to happen. We don't know where, we don't know when, we don't know exactly how many people are going to be affected. We are not ready. Tom Ridge, who was the first Secretary of Homeland Security, said to me, you know, we are not a preemptive society. We react to events. If you think about everything we did in the wake of 9/11, we spent $3 trillion on 2 wars.
But Ted, you've already said that Leon Panetta, in his Senate confirmation hearings, talked about the next Pearl Harbor will be a cyber attack. And you've talked about the fact that the president's mentioned it. You would think that that alone would create some sense of urgency.
I think people are a little bit worried about preparing the American public for something that they are not 100% sure is going to happen. My sense of it, though, is we're better off preparing. I mean, let's say we prepare for something that doesn't happen. Then we will at least be prepared for any other disaster that comes along. But I must tell you, after spending almost 2 years on this, I'm convinced that at some point or another, it's going to happen.
Why did you take this on?
And sand is an indication of the
Why did you look
consequences.
at this? Is there a brief answer to that question?
The only brief answer is I heard some of those warnings. I picked up the phone. I called Homeland Security. I called FEMA. I called the Red Cross. I got stuck in 3 different phone trees.
Yeah. Do you miss being on TV, Ted? Just listening to your voice, I think, God, I miss you, Ted Koppel, on TV. Do you miss it? Do you miss the day-to-day?
Not terribly, no.
No?
In fact, not the day-to-day, not at all.
Okay.
Don't worry about me talking to Ted. We're doing an hour, then we're doing a big thing at a conference here in New York.
I will give Charlie some questions, so he'll be ready for you.
That'll be great.
Ted Koppel, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. And Lights Out goes on sale today.
Okay. So that was his book, Lights Out, came out a few years ago. It was interesting. I was talking to some family members about that book, and they're like, oh, yeah, we don't know what happened to Ted Koppel. He went off the reservation. They were like so downplaying. It's like, yeah, Ted Koppel became alarmist. He became conspiracy theorist. No, this is a legitimate news anchor who started investigating. Is like, this is serious. This was the whole idea of EMP was, there's just to give you a little bit of background. Some of you probably already know this, but one of the first things that happened was actually in 1859. It's called the Carrington Event. And there was a massive solar flare, this burst of energy that came off the sun, and it hit the Earth about, I can't remember, is it a day and a half later or 18 hours later, one of the two. And the result was telegraphs, which was the only technology at that time, caught on fire. Some of the people that were operating telegraphs were shocked. Like literally got shocked. There was so much current flowing through it that some of the telegraph operators unplugged their, the battery system, or how they were basically being powered, and they were able to telegraph without the battery. There was so much power in the air. People in Florida saw the northern lights. They saw the northern lights because the aurora borealis, basically the flare that was coming through, had caused such tremendous upheaval. So things caught on fire. The technology at that time went haywire. Okay, you fast forward to the 1950s, and the US and Russia and different people are testing atomic bombs. They explode one off in the Pacific, and hundreds of miles later, 1,000 miles away, streetlights went out. What happened? Why'd the streetlights go out? They weren't expecting anything to happen. They were just testing these bombs, and the result is when a nuclear bomb explodes, there are rays of energy that come out. There's E1, E2, and E3. You'll see in your handout the description talking about that. Actually, could I get a handout? I handed all mine out. Yeah, could you get one? Oh, thanks. All right, so what happened is you've got these E1, E2, E3. E1 is the first initial burst in just nanoseconds initially, and smaller electronic systems. What happens is to be, I'm kind of jumping into a whole bunch of different things, but the EMP is that electromagnetic pulse, nuclear bomb, nuclear explosion of any type. If it's in the atmosphere, it's really not going to cause much damage on ground except for maybe right below that. But if it was up, let's say 300 miles above the Earth, which is kind of in the satellite range. Satellites travel between 200 and 800 miles above the Earth's atmosphere. So if you have a satellite that had a nuclear bomb on it and it were to explode over Kansas, It would basically, from line of sight, with the curve of the Earth and everything, would wipe out all electronics within line of sight, which would basically include the entire continental United States. When we say electronics, that means the phone in your pocket is a doorstop. We're saying that the computer is gone. We're saying that anything that runs with any type of electrical circuitry is likely fried. There's debates about your car, whether your car would start, especially the newer cars with the technology and computer systems, probably would not work. Older cars probably would. It's a question of how old does that car have to work. There's debates. And because we've only seen the limited testing and through the science, we haven't seen the real life experience about how this would work. But because of the nuclear testing that they did in the 50s and the 60s, we know this would happen, okay? Now, the crazy thing about an EMP is that, like he said, Russia and China, they have the technology, they've figured it out, but they're hesitant to use it. Because sure, they could knock out the United States, but we have enough stuff hardened that we could go do something back to them. So there's that mutual assured destruction, the taunt that takes place that was through the Cold War, that we're not going to destroy them because if we try to destroy them, they would destroy us. The problem, though, with a EMP attack is that it's, like they talk about a Pearl Harbor event, right? The United States during World War II did not want to get involved. Roosevelt said he does not want to get involved. He's just basically watching and watching. And it was a crazy thing for the Japanese really to attack us. We weren't expecting it. It was a complete surprise attack. But picture it like somebody coming up to you and just all of a sudden, bam, hitting you in the face. That's what Pearl Harbor was. It was like, whoa, where'd that come from? It was a black eye, right? Or 9/11. Same type of thing. But the problem is with an EMP, it's not just me punching you in the face. It's virtually like me coming up and shooting you with a gun, taking you out, because you won't be able to respond. If we literally had an EMP to take place, like I said, over Kansas, everything's fried, we are basically sent back to 1800. There's no more electronics. Anything that runs with electronics will not work or is not going to work unless it was somehow protected. Now, what does that mean? Well, how that plays out is the stuff of fiction that could become reality. There's this book called 1 Second After, and William Forstner is a college professor. He read the congressional EMP report from 2000, I don't know, what was it, 2002? Actually, I think it actually came out right around the same time as the 9/11 report, and that was what the issue was, is that the reports came out at the same time and nobody paid any attention to the EMP report because they were all focused on the 9/11 report. There was some strategy behind that because the EMP report is just scary. The report, the congressional report, said that at the end of a year, the expectation is that 90% of the population would have died if an EMP hit the United States. And the reason being is that we depend so much on power. All of our food, almost all of our food is trucked in. If the trucking stops because they don't have power, if all these things stop, we don't have the food. People die of either starvation or they die of disease. You take Haiti after a hurricane, the sanitary conditions. If the toilets no longer work, in fact, there's debate whether the toilets would actually start to come back up into your system, into your house, and you have sewer come back into your house. If all these things start to take place, life becomes very different. We are not prepared to go back to 1800. Your parents, your great-great-great-great-grandparents could handle 1800, but we can't. We're not ready for it. And so that's what the issue is. Now, related to it, what Ted Koppel says, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. He's broadening the topic, not just about EMP. EMP, like I said, Iran has been trying to get a nuclear weapon. Iran hates the United States. What would Iran like more than anything? It ran away. That's right. Okay. They would love to knock us out. And honestly, it doesn't take billions of dollars to have to launch a satellite that would literally do that. And so that's why it is something serious. North Korea would love to do that. North Korea is constantly testing their nuclear weapons and their weapons capability. But the other side of it is a cyber attack, meaning somebody literally through the web or through other resources attacking the power grid. You just saw, what was it, a couple weeks ago, where the gas line was attacked. There was a cyber attack on the gas line. As a result, gas all up the eastern coast. We didn't have as much problem here, but we had some problem. But up the East Coast, they're like, don't everybody go out and buy gas, because there was, gas stations didn't have it. And it was because there was a cyber attack on the gas line. We weren't prepared. The same thing is possible to do a cyber attack on the electrical grid. Actually, the storms this past year in Texas. Texas had major snowstorm, and as a result, they have their own power grid that they wanted to be independent, which is good. It's smart for them. But the result is when the storm happened, it was kind of a perfect storm in the sense that the wind had died down, so their wind power wasn't working. That they would draw upon. Their solar power wasn't producing as much because of the storm that had come in. And then their other power, their coal and fossil fuel power, had ramped up and had supported what it needed, but literally it was that single day that was requiring 60% more power than it had ever required in a single day. And they just weren't able to handle it. So many people were without power. Many people, I don't know how many deaths and so forth, but there was a lot of problems because of that. So we take it for granted, this type of situation, EMP, there's a lot that you can read on that. Between EMP and a cyber attack, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of a cyber attack, what's the duration, what's the extent? If one part of the grid fails, what happens is because the grid is all interconnected, it starts to cause this cascade effect that pulls the power from the other sources, which then is too much power on the source, and then they each collapse. And that's why it is a serious thing. So between medical issues, crime and violence, disease, starvation, that's the estimate. That's the congressional estimate if there was an EMP that were to explode. Now, fortunately, we live in Florida. If the EMP, they could, let's say they do decide that Iran decides to do one, they could explode it off the coast or over Chicago. Okay, then they'll hit the East Coast, and they might not hit us. Okay, so we might be outside that blast radius. The way the blast radius is, it's kind of, remember, it's line of sight, and so if it's not high enough and if it's not strong enough, then Florida might be out of the blast radius, and so our electronics might not get fried. That's one hopeful scenario. But the challenge is we're still tied to the same power grid, so we wouldn't have any power. So you got electronics, but you got no power. And that's where it comes in to have like other sources of power and being prepared in that way. All right, so what we're going to go through is like, well, how do you prepare for that? Your handout here, like I said, describes that E1, E2, E3. E1 is that initial thing that happens near the speed of light, nanoseconds, and it fries computers and everything within line of sight of the explosion. So if it's 300 miles above Kansas, we would be hit. If 350 miles above Kansas, definitely we would be hit. E2 is an intermittent pulse, 1 microsecond to 1 second after. This does additional damage, can affect electrical lines. Basically, anything that's plugged in is going to get fried. So the E1 fries your surge protector. The E2 fries everything else. Then you get E3, which is a later effect and can go on for several minutes later. And this is what would impact the electrical grid. Now, if that wasn't enough, and knowing that we have enemies that would like to take us out, there is another factor, and that is called that CME, which is a coronal mass ejection. Basically, the sun has solar flares every so many years, a major one every 150 years or so, and we're about due for another. And basically, there was one that hit, there was a solar flare that missed the Earth by about 8 minutes 9 years ago, okay? Had it hit, it literally we don't know exactly all that the damage would have been, but it could have taken out the power grid of whatever nations that it would have hit. And so there's just things in nature that God has set up that are kind of wake-up calls. And when you read the book of Revelation, there are things that apply to it that make it sound like EMP could be one of the things that is an end time scenario. If you turn to the last page of your handout, well, it would be like page 3, you'll see the verse at the bottom. And this is a strange verse. Chapter 47 of Isaiah is addressed to Babylon, okay? Now there's discussion and debate about Babylon. Who is Babylon? Is Babylon literal Babylon? Is it another nation? Is it the pagan time and system? Some people believe that daughter of Babylon is a reference to the United States. I'm not going to die on that hill and say definitely we are, but if we are, read this verse. Verse 5, sit in silence and go into darkness, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for you shall no longer be called the Lady of Kingdoms. Skipping ahead to verse 11, therefore evil shall come upon you. You shall not know from where it arises, and trouble shall fall upon you. You will not be able to put it off, and desolation shall come upon you suddenly, which you shall not know. If you read Revelation 17 and 18, it talks about the destruction of Babylon that happens in an hour. It says in a single hour, the whole nation of Babylon. Now, interesting thing is Babylon is south of Baghdad in Iraq. It is on the Tigris River, but it is not on any other, it's not a seaport, okay? And yet the description in Revelation, I can't remember if it's 17 or 18, describes it as the ships and the oceans of Babylon. And it's like, but Babylon is not on an ocean. So that makes me think that it's not talking about a literal Babylon. It's talking about another type of Babylon. And so if that's the United States, I don't know, but it is something to consider. And with all that we're finding out about technology, we don't operate in fear, we operate in faith, and that means preparing. So how do you prepare for this? That's what we're gonna talk about. And basically, it's like hurricane prep. It is. It's just to a much higher degree. So we're gonna dive into this. First, starting talking, Daryl, why don't you talk about the food and water in the situation of an EMP?
Have all you guys kind of heard of this before and come to grips to some degree with this possibility of an EMP? I kind of remember when I first heard of this, and at first it sounded conspiracy, and the more I heard about it, it's not some fantasy possibility. There's a certain mathematical percentage degree, what it is, I don't know, that this is a real possibility. And then it's such a huge thing. I mean, what do you really do? I mean, think about that. We'll be knocked back to the 1800s in the blink of an eye. And what does that look like? What does society, I mean, what does it look like for me and my family and my neighbors and my loved ones? And it's an overwhelming thought to think about. I guess every gray cloud does have a silver lining, though. I mean, 90% of us get to go home with Jesus. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? But that is not going to be God's plan for all of us. And I need to plan and be prepared for my family. So we started looking into what does that look like. There is no hope that the refrigerator or the oven or that the Publix is ever going to be a place of food again. So what does that look like now that we have a chance to plan and prepare for that? And one of the first and easiest things that we learned about was these, preparing buckets of food. And we did a seminar several months back. The video is online. We went into how you do that. But basically, it's these Mylar bags. You can buy them online, and you put an oxygen absorber in there, and then you seal it with, we use just a flat iron, and it kind of melts it together, and we store them in these buckets, and the lid gets banged on, and it really protects food long term. I forget what it is, but I think,
25 years.
25 years. And we've been slowly doing this, and we have accumulated quite a few buckets. If you do the math, I'm a family of 6, and we have parents, and we have neighbors, and unfortunately, you just can't prepare for yourself. I mean, other people are going to need help. when you do the calculation on calories and what people need, it's a lot. So this is something that you should begin thinking about and preparing. Again, what's the best way to eat an elephant? You know, one little bite at a time. It's overwhelming if you look at the whole thing, but if you start now and in preparing for that, there's some expensive options. You can buy the MREs if you want to go out and just, if you have thousands of dollars, you can do that. And especially if you're just one or two people, that's a viable option. For 6 of us, it really wasn't. So we started with some of the basics, which is, you know, rice and beans, and you can fill up a bunch of buckets of rice and beans. I used to go to the store sometimes, and I'd see those 50-pound bags of rice and beans, and who the heck is buying those things? All of a sudden, I'm the guy with a cart loaded full of rice and beans, and we're filling up our buckets. Another thing to consider is storage. Like, you kind of need a good place to put them. You don't want to just have them out in the middle of your house where they're visible. You want to be somewhat discreet. It's not the kind of thing you want to broadcast to everybody, that you want everybody to know, hey, if anything bad happens, I'm going to his house because he's done all the work already, you know? We certainly want to share with our loved ones and have enough, but I can't prepare for the entire world. I have to, you know, do the best I can. Another thing I started to think about was, okay, you can only, Jesus, EMP thing, this could last a long time. I mean, how much rice and beans and food can you really keep on hand? You have to start either producing your own food or finding sources for your food. A nice thing about here in Florida, where we are, there's lots of lakes and canals, and they're great sources for fishing. You wouldn't want to all of a sudden, you would want to start practicing that now, you know, figuring out how to do that. And something like a pole and a line might not be the best option. Nets are really, you know, they have the cast nets and different nets, because the world's going to be a pretty scary place if we are trying to stay alive by going to catch a fish in the lake or canal behind our house. There's going to be very desperate people, and desperate people do things that they normally wouldn't do. So it's not going to be like going out for a great day of fishing and sitting there on the banks and catching stuff. You're going to want to move quick and discreetly. So these are strange things to say and to think about, but you have to, you know, consider what society and what the world will be like. But there are places to go and get food, and this is something you do in your normal life, is to start considering that and looking around and where would those places be. You may come to a point in time where the place you're staying no longer has any safe, viable sources of food, and then what do you do at that point in time? You should have some plan in place. Okay, we're going to find a way to get to here, or, you know, maybe there's a group of you that all decide, you know, this is what we would do. This is part of being prepared. We found some cool things to grow. I don't know if you've ever tried to grow anything down here in Florida. It's pretty challenging, especially if all of a sudden you don't have easy access to water and fertilizer. You want to consider plants that kind of just do their own thing. We found these. These are called Seminole pumpkins. And we've tried to grow all kinds of other types of squash and things, and the bugs just eat them, and you have to water them. They're very temperamental. We put a couple of seeds in the ground, and this thing grew a vine. I mean, it would have covered this whole section, and one plant produced like 20 of these things. And the nice thing is they store. You don't have to worry about preservation. You know, you can cut this thing off and you can keep it, and it stores, they say, up to a year. So things like this are really good. We found another plant called cassava, which seems to be doing really good. We just cut off a piece of it and they propagate themselves and they make these massive roots. And you want to consider calories. You know, you might think, oh, tomatoes. There's not really that many calories in a tomato, and they're very temperamental. You know, you want to think about something that's easy, that you're not going to have to be a slave to, that you could just have growing. And the time to do that isn't when the disaster strikes and then you're trying to find seeds and you're trying to prepare your soil. Now is the time. You want to have these things already going and in place in the event something happens, because then you're able to, you know, a little bit of what you're producing, a little bit of what you saved, you go and you catch a fish, or it might be a squirrel or snakes or bugs, who knows how difficult it'll get. We also brought some chickens in, so now we have, you know, the chickens are making eggs, the chickens make chickens, so that's another thing. If you live in certain neighborhoods where they don't allow livestock, there's kind of a way around that. There's these chickens called bantams that are technically ornamental birds, and you're kind of able to go around that, and you are able to have, it's a constant source of protein. So those are some things to consider. Anything else on the food? I'll do water next.
I think the bantams are excellent, you know.
And
cry foul, right? One of the things, sorry about, I'm just going to jump in on the hunting, and that's another use for firearms, but also in a Teotihuacan, the end of the world as we know it situation, where this has happened and everybody's scavenging for food. I don't necessarily want people to know that I'm firing my firearm, so bow and arrow, crossbow, those types of things are good, and they're not that expensive. It takes some practice. It takes practice with any of those things, but having some things like that, I've got a bow and arrow, and get the thing out and practice it, because nobody's going to hear that. They will hear even your 22 and even your airsoft. They're going to hear.
And since there is no more refrigeration, I mean, people did survive without refrigeration. There was, pioneers here in Florida that found ways to, if you catch something, a deer, you're going to have a lot of meat. I mean, how fast can you eat it? There's smoking techniques and salting, and people knew how to can and do the mason jars and stuff like that. Would be useful skill to, now that we still have a Google and an internet to go and either print those pages out. You certainly wouldn't want to all of a sudden be like, well, what do I do? I mean, now is the time to kind of figure out some of those things. And even if you don't want to be an expert on it now, you could at least go and you could print out a sheet and have that information available to you on how you could store and preserve some of the food that you were growing. Any questions or comments on food? I mean,
one other thing I was going to say, it's funny, my son was just watching a YouTube last night, and it was like doing these challenge questions. Like, if you were stranded on an island and you had to eat the same food for a year, which would be the healthiest? And the three options that they gave were bread and pasta, steak and broccoli, or rice and beans. All right? Which of those three is going to be the healthiest for you if you could have them for a year?
Rice and beans.
The rice and beans. You're like, what about the steak and broccoli? The rice and beans have all 9 of the essential amino acids that your body needs. Steak and broccoli is good for you, but you're not going to have all the things that your body needs, and eventually you're going to have problems. And of course, the bread and pasta, in 6 to 9 months, you'd get scurvy. If you saw the movie, was it called The Martian? Mars, Matt Damon, he's eating potatoes for as long as he could on Mars, and he's getting scurvy because he's not getting the other nutrients. Your body needs the other nutrients. As boring as it sounds, rice and beans can go a long ways, and you can store a lot of meals in some buckets.
And it's affordable. Anybody can really afford to go out and get a couple, buckets and the Mylar bags and put away a lot of rice and beans, and it's a great supplement. You shouldn't just rely on that. You should be thinking about other sources. There's also a ton of edible plants and things just growing around you. Again, that now would be the time to research and be aware of the things that are available to you. There's probably plants and things growing that you never even knew that you could eat. I'm still learning about that. I'm not an expert on that topic, but it's something I'd like to learn more about. And people are constantly showing me this little weird thing growing out of the, on my yard. Oh yeah, you could eat that. Well, okay, that's pretty good to know,
Yeah, we planted some longevity spinach, one of the things that Connor mentioned, just one little pot of longevity spinach, and now I've got a section, not quite as big as the stage, but it just keeps growing, and it's on its own, and it's all edible. It just becomes this, leafy green that you want to eat. Any other thoughts on food, Sharon?
Sure, like oats and flour and stuff like that. Yeah, we've done that. Yeah.
So yeah, the problem is if you keep it in its whole natural state, it can last decades. So the wheat berries, like before you grind them, or corn or whatever, if you store it untampered with, it lasts. But as soon as you crack it, the oils get released, and then they go bad quickly. And just the same thing, like, I like brown rice better than white rice, but storing brown rice is not worth it, because the oils, brown rice stored in your Mylar bags will still go bad within a year or two. White rice in the bucket, 25 years. Okay, not as good, not as healthy, but if you're talking survival, I want the thing that's going to last longer. And the reality is, the other thing too that we didn't talk about is that you need to cycle things through. Like we have a pantry and we have shelves, and I always put when I go to the store and buy something, I put the new stuff in the back, I cycle the other stuff forward, and it's important to keep cycling and eat it. You want to, when you get the bucket, you label it. 10 years from now, you might want to eat that bucket, okay, and get a new bucket to replace that 10-year-old bucket, and then you get to see how well did you do. It's actually a good thing to test, because you make all these plans, and if you never test them, you find out, in fact, you guys did that, didn't you?
This is actually, I opened this one up because we do want to cycle this. This was our first attempt in doing this. I'm looking at this. This is from 2015. So we're going to see how well this lasted and how well we did.
But I thought you said, like, you guys did some that you didn't do right, and you had, like, weevils, or you had something in them.
So at first, when we first got involved in it, we didn't have all the supplies. Like, we got the bags, and we didn't have the buckets. So then we had some of the bags just on a shelf, and yeah, we actually had a mouse get into our garage, and he chewed a hole in just a little tiny hole in the bottom of every single bag. I mean, one little thing, destroyed everything. And then, yeah, I think we have, the weevils are just in those big bags of rice and beans, but I believe when you absorb the oxygen, I don't think they can survive.
The eggs are, in any bag of rice, you're going to have weevil eggs. That's just nature. And so you want to, if you suck the oxygen out, you're fine. Some people I know, though, they'll cook it in the oven at 200 degrees for an hour or something. There's lots of different things you can read on the internet about it.
I think weevils will be the least of our concerns at that
honestly,
point.
Yeah.
They might,
might be
it's extra protein. That's the exact mindset. That's extra protein, maybe a little flavor to the rice. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah, Kevin.
Are certain beans more nutritious than others?
Yes.
We bought a whole bunch of different beans. So we've, just for variety, I figure each one has a little something different, and for variety. So there's some of these, I guess we'll call them ethnic markets, or what and you go in there, they got bags of stuff, that you don't find at Publix or Costco. Just all different types of beans and things that are really inexpensive. And there's different variety. That was one thing we said, look, if we're going to be doing this, it can't just be kidney beans, for the next 10 years. Let's at least have a couple different things.
You want to pack foods that you will eat. Don't pack foods that, well, I'll never eat that. I'm just storing it in case I have to. Pack foods that you want to eat. So, like, if you don't like lima beans, then pack black beans or red beans. There's all sorts. great. That's great.
Nice. I don't remember what the calculation was. If you go back and watch that video that we did, my wife was up here and she did the math on that. And there is, every person needs X amount of calories, per day. And she did the math on what the rice and the beans were, like basically what each bucket, how many calories were in each bucket. I don't remember, but it is astonishing how many you need. I mean, if I just had to guess, I'd say for a family of 3, depending on how long you were hoping to make it last, I don't think 20 buckets would be obscene, and I think that'd be
yeah, it is. It's a matter. I think it's a matter of prayer, and you ask the Lord, Lord, how many should we do? And there are, if you go to on Google, there's like food calculator, and like if you type in bucket food calculator, for example, and it'll tell you, well, if you want to go for 3 months, here's how many buckets, here's how many servings of rice or buckets of rice and different things. You can fit about 30 pounds, 32 to 33 pounds of rice in a 5-gallon bucket, and that's a lot of servings of rice. And yet, if you had a month without food, and you're eating, let's say you're just eating rice and beans, you'd be surprised how much you'll go through. I don't remember what the exact calculation is, but
I remember I felt pretty good. We had a whole closet filled, and I was like, yeah, we're set. Then my wife went and did that calculation on the thing. I said, oh my goodness, we don't have anything. I mean, this.
Yeah, it's like you take the number and then you plug it in. And you realize, oh, I thought I'm good for months.
Yeah.
No, with my family of 6, I was good for 3 weeks. And so then I'm like, okay, well, let's get some more. And then you just got to figure out where you're going to store them. And I know some families, what they've done is they've stored them and they've made, tables. Like, these are the legs of the table. They stack the rice buckets, and then they put a door or a piece of plywood up on that, and the result is that's their table. Or there's lots of different ways to store it. But that's what you got to figure out, because you can easily. The thing is, if you had 6 or 8 buckets of rice and beans, you're way ahead of most people. Okay, which is great. And so you pray, Lord, is that where we're supposed to stop? And if that's where you're supposed to stop, then you stop. But if the Lord wants you to do more, because maybe you're going to have people that are going to come to you, and maybe it's not just going to be the 3 of you. Maybe you're going to have other neighbors that are going to need to be relying on you. So our purpose here is to seek the Lord and ask Him, what's the number? And it may be something. It may be something that never happens. Okay, it may be something that I'm storing up, and the Lord's going to take me home, and the rapture happens, and somebody's going to find my house and be like, oh, thank you. And they're going to see all the Bibles, and they're going to say, who was this person? So. All right, a couple other things we want to talk about. So then your house prep, home prep.
We didn't do water.
Oh, do the water.
That's like the most vital thing. I think you can go, 2 weeks without food, technically, but
3 weeks without food, but only 3 days without water.
3 days.
3 minutes without air.
3 days. So we touched on that during the hurricane. Having one of these Sawyer squeezes becomes a lot more important if you're thinking EMP than hurricane. You're not going to be able to stockpile enough water in your house. So this makes it pretty safe. And when he talks about that, 90% of people, Americans, won't make it. I think that's probably a lot of it. People are going to start doing desperate things with water, in particular, drinking water that they shouldn't. They're going to get sick, and there's going to be no ability to correct that sickness. So boiling water is another option, but you're going to have limited resources to fuel, to heat it and boil it appropriately. I mean, there's only going to be so much fencing and trees, especially if you're in a populated space. So this little Sawyer squeeze thing, I highly recommend having a couple of them on hand, because they do, thousands, or an unbelievable amount of filtration.
I think it's 1 million gallons. So it's good. You're good. Sawyer, Sawyer.
And it's super easy to use.
Find it on REI. You can find it on Amazon. Like I said, the mini is okay, but spring for a little bit more money for the regular, because you'll thank me, because there's more water flow.
And it's the kind of thing, if you do have to leave, bug out, as they say, you can put this in a backpack, and anywhere along your way, you're not going to be worried about what you're going to drink. You can just take that and you can literally fill that bag and you can squeeze it right into your mouth as you're traveling. Water won't be your big concern.
Kevin.
If you can only find salt or brackish water, how will it work in Sawyer?
You know, actually, it's funny you said that because in the last session we mentioned that. And I was going to look it up on my phone just to confirm. I'm pretty sure what you may want to have to do is have it go through twice, cycle it through twice. But I'm pretty sure you can drink the salt water, but it's you know, and even it filters 99.999% of contaminants. You know, it's blocking out the bugs, the diseases, all that stuff. So it's really good. But you may have to filter that twice. The other thing too, if you're drinking some really dirty water, filter it through the sock first, because remember, there's tiny little filter that's having to take care of it. So the simpler you can make the job for it, the better. All right, moving on then to house prep. You know, in the case of this kind of society, basically you're going to have societal meltdown, and so you need to have your home prepared, kind of like what we talked about with the hurricane prep, but to another higher level. So firearms are, you know, it's not a bad idea. You need to pray about that, what the Lord would have you do, but being prepared in the event that crazy people show up. Increasing the security, you know, your doors, the standard door lock really does not take a lot of pressure to kick through, but you can get longer screws that go into the door jamb to make that door more secure, deadbolts and so forth. You know, when we lived in New York, we lived in Rochester, New York. I was in New York City. Visited some friends in New York City. And, you know, you go into the apartment in New York City, and all the door locks. You know, you gotta have 4 locks, right? Because they want to make sure that door stays locked. You may not need to have that many, but you probably want a little bit more security than you do right now, just for that peace of mind. Also, in terms of your house prep, thinking about power. You know, a generator. You know, so I've got that 500-gallon propane tank. Well, that's great. But if we're without power for a year, 500 gallons ain't gonna last me very long. So I need to have other power sources, and having some solar panels. I don't have solar panels doing my whole house, but I've been looking into it. I've been researching it for a couple years, and I've been really honestly, part of it is I've been waiting for the biggest problem with solar panels. If you get solar panels on your whole house today, it's set up so that if the power goes out, you don't have power either. Okay? And you're like, well, why? Because the idea is that in a hurricane situation, you lose power, FPL is coming and they're trying to set up power as soon as possible. Okay? The solar system works in such a way that if the sun is shining, it's powering your house, and any excess power is sent back into the power grid. Okay? Well, in the event that the power goes out, the system is set to shut down so that you stop producing power. In the event that the FPL guy comes and he gets the power, he's working on the lines, he doesn't want to get shocked by the power coming from your place. So literally FPL has it set up so that if there's a power outage, you don't have power either. Okay? Now part of that sounds wrong, but part of it is literally it's a health precaution for the FPL workers. Now in the event that we have an EMP and all the power goes away, I'm going in and I'm fixing my power. If I have the solar panels, I'm going in and I'm fixing it so that I'm rewiring it so that I get my power. Okay, but you have to have it. Now you can have it set up. You can have a 2-pole system, and there's a lot of different additional expenses. It can be very expensive to do a whole house system. Does anybody have a whole house solar system, solar power system? They run in the $30,000 and more. Okay. But the way they work it, you can work it with the PACE program and so forth. You can finance it, and basically the finance payment will basically equate to what you'd normally be paying FPL. So you can do it so it doesn't actually cost you anything, especially if you pay taxes at all, if you pay any significant taxes, there's like a 27 or a 25% tax credit. So like say you pay $35,000 for your solar per package, then you'd have about $12,000 that you would have as a tax credit that you could apply over the next few years. So there are benefits to it, but you got, once again, you got to shop around. Just like I said about the hurricane windows and glass, there are lots of places that'll sell you this system at this price, when if you shop around, you can get it at this price. And you got to compare apples to apples because they're not all created equal. All right? So consider power, consider the sanitation, the buckets. You're going to need to have something, have a system. And, you can get a dollar pool noodle and put it on a bucket, and you've got at least something that'll work. Consider landscaping. Your house is beautiful and you've got it all landscaped nice. In the event that security is an issue, because if we're talking EMP, we're literally talking, sad thing is, there will be like gangs and just crazy societal meltdown. So what does that mean? It means thinking through, how is the landscaping at the front of your house, the back of your house set up? Is it set up so that somebody could do a surprise attack on you that work against you? Is it set up so that you can defend yourself? One of the things that I haven't done yet, but I'm planning to do is, and maybe you're interested in going in with me, I'm going to get a bulk order of sandbags. Okay, and the whole point of sandbags, obviously if there's a flood, you fill them with sand and you can help prevent the floodwaters coming up to your house. But also, you can do sandbags and you can create a wall defense if somebody's trying to shoot. And so I was looking at getting sandbags at, pretty cheap. You need to get hundreds of them, but by the time you spend, they're not filled with sand. They're empty sandbags. But I'm getting a pallet order of sandbags. I don't need the whole pallet, but I want the pallet price. So if you want to get some sandbags, let me know after the service, and we'll go in and get a pallet of sandbags. Yeah. I'm not familiar with it. Now that'd be interesting. If the purpose is to inflate or to fill in such a way to prevent water, that could work. I'm looking for the dual purpose of, I want to be able to have the water protection, but I also have the physical barrier protection that is a defensive posture. If I'm hiding behind a wall of sandbags, a bullet coming in gets slowed down by those pretty quickly, depending on what bullet. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, so the whole house generators, because you got the whole house generator, and then it's a matter, is it powered by propane? Is it powered by solar? Yeah. Yeah, so $5,000, what are you getting for a $5,000 solar generator? Okay, so, and a stove. Yeah, because well, you know what? Actually, I did see some of those. Yeah, for about that was what I was looking at. Between $3,000 and $5,000, you can get the kind of what we were talking about earlier, the battery bank, and then a number of solar panels. The challenge is anything that has a heating element has a huge draw. So something powering a stove is going to be massive. A refrigerator, not as bad, but still a lot of draw. So some of those can be great.
In the EMP scenario, they would all be fried, right?
You have to do your homework, and you have to do protection for that device. So they make what's called, we're going to talk about EMP protection in just a minute. Well, we'll dive in now, because that's where I'm going next. So the easiest way, now they do make what EMP-proof bags and blankets. Now, I'm still wondering about, there's a bunch of people that have done a lot of study. There's a guy, he calls himself Dr. EMP, Arthur Bradley. At the very end of your handout, there's a book that's recommended by him. And he's done a lot of study. He's created these things that are electrically, they're conductive. And so basically it's like a blanket or a bag that you can put stuff in. And you can buy small bags that are like this size that you can put your phone in. And so your phone is protected. Now your phone, in the event of an EMP, even if you have a phone, it's not going to be very useful because it's not going to be able to connect to anything, okay? So if your phone can't make any calls, what is the purpose of keeping the phone? The phone is useful if I want to keep files on it of PDFs and all those things. That's when the phone becomes useful. Or, I mean, they make them actually you can keep your phone in your little, in a little bag. The thing is you can't receive any calls unless you take it out of the bag. But hey, at night, you can put it in the little bag. But there's different ways. They make a blanket, and you could literally buy one. It would cost you a little bit of money, but you could put your solar generator into that bag, and so that it's protected in the event, and then that way it could help power your house. Okay, now recognize too, if it says it's going to power your house, it's only going to power your house for a few hours. But if it's going to power your, maybe it's going to power like I had that little portable AC unit to keep it, at least cool it off a little bit at night. If it's going to keep my refrigerator so that my food doesn't spoil. Man, those are the things. The stove, for me, I don't think I'd want to run the stove because it's going to draw more energy. I'm better off using firewood, like having a brick stove that I'm going to cook outside. I have cinder blocks and different things that I had some construction at my house. I ordered extra cinder blocks so that I can use them to make a brick oven if I want. And literally just stack the bricks next to each other. I cook in there, and we did a couple meals that way. It was kind of fun. The solar oven is, they're expensive, and a couple $100, but it's kind of interesting. It'll cook some food. It's like this little tube, and then it opens up, and it literally reflects the light into this canister, and it'll heat, vegetables. It takes a little while. It takes quite a while to cook meat, but you can see things online about it, and it's another little option for you. Yeah, camping stove. I think everybody should have a camping stove, because I like to camp. But in the event of a hurricane, you should have a camping stove because you don't necessarily always want to fire up the whole grill. Or sometimes you want to do you're doing something on the grill and you need that extra little thing.
But just thinking through this, unless you had your refrigerator in one of those bags and the stove in one of those bags, any of those things you'd be hoping, or your air conditioner, anything that wasn't kept in one of those bags would be rendered useless.
But remember, the EMP blast, if you picture the United States, if the EMP blast is high enough and powerful enough, yes, everything's wiped out. But if it's not, and the blast doesn't reach us, it's possible that we may still have electronics. The other thing is, Dr. EMP, he has this different way that he says that he can protect your whole house. I don't quite understand the technology. It's with these ferrite magnets, and you put them on your panel. But you can research that in some of the links that we provide to show you different ways to protect your whole house. Yes. Uh-huh. I think that's the same material. It's the same thing. I think it's just a matter of how thick they are.
This seems much thicker, these bags. And even with this, it's pretty fragile. When you're going to melt them together, you have to be kind of careful. So in theory, you probably could. Yeah.
It'd be like, these are probably like 2 mil Mylar bags versus those are probably 1/2 mil. I mean, they're very, the balloons. But that is an option. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is what's called a Faraday cage. A guy named Faraday, he discovered that he could basically create a box of sorts that if there was an electromagnetic pulse, think about this electromagnetic wave is coming and it hits this and it circles all the way around the box, and because it creates this dome protection, electromagnetic shield basically, so that everything inside is protected. The key is that you can't have any holes in that. Any holes, then that electromagnetic wave gets inside and fries the stuff inside. But if you basically create the box, is yours? Okay, we've got a couple different. This is Daryl's. And so what he did is he's got the smaller garbage can, and you can see then he's got the foam that he put on the inside. Because if you just had if you have this you have this metal can, and you just set your stuff inside, the metal is going to conduct to the other stuff inside, and all that stuff gets fried. You put the foam, and that acts as insulation, So it's an insulator around so that nothing in here gets the electromagnetic pulse. So everything in here stays safe. Electromagnetic pulse happens, the power goes out, you want to wait, I think you want to wait at least 15 minutes, I can't remember what the number is, because of the aftershocks and effects, and then you pull out your devices will work, okay, provided that there's something they can connect to or that they can turn on. So once you go through the stuff so basically what we did is just took a garbage can,
Yep.
and you got neoprene, buy this online, I think it was like, what, $30 on Amazon. You can take this and then you coat this, you just cut it, and afterwards you can come up and take a look and see.
But the key also is, if you look at the lid, you see how there's like a little space. I didn't go all the way to the edge. You need to have the metal from the lid make contact with the metal here. So if it hits, it all channels down along the sides and doesn't go inside of it.
It has to be metal to metal all the way around. If the lid, like if he's got all his stuff in there and he's in a hurry one day and he leaves his lid like this, game over. Everything's fried because it's not connected metal to metal, okay? So why don't you walk us through what you've got in your Faraday cage here?
So these are just some of the things, we have flashlights, we have some lanterns, and most importantly, these walkie-talkies, so we can communicate with other people. I guess we'll get into communications later. What else did we put in there? That's about it, just some lights, one of those hand crank radios, and we'll throw some other items in there too, just anything that's electrical that we'd like to hang on to that we think would be useful, but mostly just some lights and communication devices.
Thinking electronics. You don't need to put in there, like your alkaline batteries are probably not going to be affected, all right? But it's things that have a chip in them, especially like your lithium-ion batteries, are going to be affected. The batteries for like the radios, like honestly, if we are sent back to 1800, the thing that's going to be most helpful for you, the radio is probably going to be, besides your food, the next most important thing is communication. How do I communicate with people? Setting up a neighborhood watch, talking about your family members that are out hunting, and you're trying to say, hey, come help me, I found a deer. And we're gonna haul it back to the house. Having those types of things, your radio is the most important thing that I wanna protect. And so what I do, so I have a larger one that, partly I wanted that size because this one is just so big. But the advantage of the big one is I shopped around and I found a solar panel, 100-watt solar panel that I can fit in here. Unfortunately, it's not coming until Monday, so you don't get to see that solar watt panel. But basically, it folds out like 4 panels that fold, and it'll go right inside mine. Now, what I did, instead of the neoprene, I took bubble wrap or foam, and this is the electrostatic foam. This is the kind that if you buy an electronic, a hard drive or whatever, this is what it comes wrapped in because it's protecting it from the electrical charge, from static electricity. But the same thing, I kept it so that I've got a metal-on-metal connection, but this is on top in case there's anything that's sticking up. And this is a little bit cheaper. I have another one. I have another can that's in between these sizes that I did with the, I did this one first, and when I saw Daryl's, I was like, I had envy. So I went out and I got my own with foam, and I have 2 cans. So this one's got my bigger equipment. In mine, as I mentioned, I've got the hand crank weather radio, emergency radio. I've got a bunch of radios. I think radios are gonna be the most valuable thing in this event afterwards. And so as a barter item, man, this is gonna be huge. As in terms of family network, I've got power banks, a power cell. So basically, I can charge, if I have a way to charge it, I can keep the power together. Once again, the radios. Here is my current solar cell. And basically, it just opens up. And then I have a cable then that connects to the power cell. This doesn't provide, this is like how many watts is this? This is a 13 watt. Okay, to give you perspective, this is a 13 watt. When I was shopping for a whole house system, I was looking at 11 kilowatt, 11,000 watts. Okay, so 11,000 watts is what I need to power my house. The 13 kilowatts, this is gonna charge what is it gonna charge? My cell phone's gonna be worthless. It's gonna charge my radio. That's what this is for. Charging my radio, maybe I'll have a small fan that I could use off of it. You're not gonna be able to have a whole lot of things from it. I throw in some regular alkaline batteries just because I wanna make sure that I have the batteries available. Not that I'm really not afraid of them getting fried by the EMP, but I want them in the same place so that when I need them, I've got them. And plus, I've got a huge 50-gallon garbage can. I've got an antenna, an extra antenna for my radio to make sure. Would this be affected in an EMP? No. I didn't think so.
Would it be a better antenna than what comes from the radio?
Yeah, the radio itself, these antennas are fair to partly cloudy. These you extend your distance where they double the distance. I mean, it's amazing how much better.
Probably 4 times.
Yeah, 4 times the distance by buying this $15, $20 antenna. Okay, now I'm getting into some other, not necessarily paranoid, but just preventative measures. This is this outdoor security camera. You're like, well, how are you gonna power it? Well, you power it during the day and you put it up at night. If you have a security watch, you literally could do this. For example, when I've got this much space, and if I've got, for example, if I have the whole house solar panel system, I've got plenty of power to power a number of different devices that may give me an edge in security. So I just threw this in because it was on sale. Here is a little motion detector device, and basically, you know, little things. In terms of security, what are you thinking that might be helpful? Now, the other thing is, you don't want people to know that you have power. So my security camera, or even I was going to buy a set of lights, of the security lights, you know, like motion detection lights. Okay, right? But if you retrofit them with infrared lights, people can't see them. Okay, you can't see infrared light, right? So you retrofit them with the infrared light. People don't know that you have the infrared light on, and the reality is, if you have then night vision or anything like that, you'll be able to see them, but they won't be able to see you. It's just taking things to another level. Here are some rechargeable batteries. Okay, these might be affected, so I've got them in my Faraday cage. And then let's see, what else is this? Oh, this is an extended battery for my my radio. More radios. Now, I do have a phone in here, and as I mentioned before, the point of the phone is not that I'm going to make calls, because there's not going to be anybody to call, and there's not going to be any system or network. Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T are gone. But on my phone, I could have thousands of PDFs to tell me, how do I can food? Tell me, how do I emergency medical things? Like, how do I do a tracheotomy? I mean, obviously right now, I don't have a clue. But if I'm in a life situation, man, I've got something that I can refer to that has all these things on this device. Now, recognize too, with the phone, anything that has that lithium-ion battery, you need to charge it ideally once a month, and charge and use and so forth. Otherwise, your battery will be seconds. But those are the things you have to think about. An old phone, you could put a bunch of stuff on it that could be helpful. You could put medical information. You could put pictures. Most of us keep our pictures digitally. It would be sad that all of our pictures, not only do we lose the power, but we lose all those memories. It's powerful to be able to go back and to see those pictures and things. All right, so that's what I have in here. Now, what I have in each of my cars is an ammo can, and you can do the same thing. You can create a Faraday cage out of an ammo can. Now, in the ammo can, this is the basics. I just have a radio, flashlight, and batteries are basically what I put in the ammo can. But all you do, you take a metal ammo can. Most ammo cans are metal, so it's not an issue. But make sure it's a metal ammo can. They come with a rubber gasket, which makes a beautiful seal to keep water out, but it won't keep an electromagnetic pulse out. You have to take out the metal or the rubber gasket, and then what I took is foil wrap, and I just continue to wrap it and make my own foil gasket. For about $35, you can buy a specifically designed electrostatic gasket, and then you can add that to that if you want. For about 30 cents, I added the foil wrap, okay? And I just did the same thing with that electrostatic wrap, and I put that inside. I forgot that they fall off. But it's actually pretty simple, and you can get the ammo can. The used ammo cans are $10 to $12. I even found new ones as cheap as $13. Buy a new ammo can, put this stuff in it, and I put it in my car. Now here's the reality. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with the cars. In the event of a pulse, some people say that unless your car is pre-1975, it won't start. It won't run. There's different electronic systems, the ignition system. Like I said, there's debate about whether it will work or not. I don't know. But you know what? It's not that hard to make this little ammo can. Take this ammo can, put in a radio, put in some essential supplies, and then I've got one in each car. If the car does stop, we had a plan. My wife, works in Boca, and the kids go to school with her in Boca, and it's a long ways. If the car doesn't work, it's 25 miles. So we had a plan. In the event that something happened, she's got her radio, and she knows we've got friends that are part way, and so we're like, okay, we've talked to them, and like in the event that something happens, they're going to go the first day, they're going to get to this house and stay there, and then the next day they're going to come to this house and then make it back. Because 25 miles in a single day may be hard, especially if you've got 4 kids, and at the time, some of them were like 4 years old. They're getting older now, but having a plan, having in your car at all times, just a wise thing, a preparedness thing. Walking shoes. What if your car is stalled for whatever reason? Your car breaks down and you have to walk 2 miles to find some help. You want to have some good walking shoes. The other thing I like to try to keep in the car is like some energy bars, so that I've always got some food, that I've got enough food and walking shoes and some water so that I can last for a day or 2 days to get to what I need to do.
Probably one of those life straws too would be an essential item to have.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Even though the life straw is not going to be affected by an EMP, throw it in here. If you have the space, why not have it as all like, here's my emergency bucket of things that I need, or you maybe put your first aid kit in there. So that the key is you want to keep things simple, so that you're ready in the event that something happens. You're ready, and you got to have a plan. Having a plan. All right, so those are my Faraday cages. One other thing, let's see, where's my list? Talking about communications, and there it is. The last thing that I wanted to mention, there's three last points, then we'll wrap up.
Did you do transportation?
Oh, yeah, thanks. Transportation. So your car, will it work? Will it not? We don't know. Like I said, if you're pre-75, you're probably okay. If you're pre-89, you might be okay. If you just bought it last year, I don't think it's going to work. And if it's a Tesla, so you don't know. We don't know, but be prepared. Having bicycles. Bicycles are great. And it's not, some people are like, well, you're not going to worry about transportation. Yeah, you're going to worry about how do you know what, let's say you have to scavenge for food. There's a point at which all the food in this area is going to be gone, and you're going to want to go down the road. If you could go 5 miles and go west to get further away where there's fewer people, there might be more food and things there. Or you're going to go visit your family, and the bicycle's the only way to do it. motorcycle. There are some EMP ready vehicles, motorcycle type vehicles that are already, they will certainly work. They've designed them. I forget what the name of it was, but you can, for $500, you can get one of them. They don't go over 25 miles per hour, but hey, you might be the only thing around that's going 25 miles per hour in the event of a major one. Along with transportation, skateboard, that's another option. Just, those of you that are skateboarders, keep one in the back of your car. I'd rather, my skateboarding skills are not very good, but my kids, they could at least go home and they could get it home. I won't make it home, but they will.
What about roller skates?
Yeah, roller skates, roller blades. But another thing that I think is important, in the event of an EMP, paper maps become essential.
No longer is Siri available.
Yeah, Siri, Google, they're no longer available. And so having the maps, we have in our van, whenever we travel, we have a paper map. In the event that something happens, that we no longer can use this map, I've got the paper map. And here's the thing, if you've traveled at all across the United States, there are times where this doesn't work. I had directions and I'm going directions, and even though I'd lost cell signal, it's still working on the GPS, right? Well, what happens though, as soon as I decide, I'm like, oh, I wanted to zoom out, or I wanted to change things, it couldn't get the new data. So now I'd lost everything. And I'm like, okay. And so that's where my paper maps really come in key. Now, not just a regular, so I have an atlas that's of the United States, but then I also have local trail maps, so I'm ready. Topographical maps are helpful so that you can have landmarkers and know altitudes and things. Those are all good ideas. So transportation, anything else on transportation you want to say?
No, I just think the bicycle is going to be the key thing. And if you are stuck someplace, and I guess I could travel everywhere I go with a bicycle in the back of my truck. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to, well, no, just to get home to my family. Say I'm down in Miami working and something happens, I'm going to borrow somebody's bicycle and I'm getting home. So, yes.
I think there's a map called the DORM map. It actually shows roadways and vehicular trails that are not listed on whatever other maps that you may have.
Yeah, so there are different maps with different specificity, so that you're saying an ORM map. I'm not familiar with it, but...
The WARM. I forget.
The WARM? Okay. So, yeah, and so just researching that. Personally, I want to have a map of Palm Beach County that gives me all the roads so that I can know how to get around. I know basics, but if my friend that I need to visit is on such and such road, do I know the best way to get there? Do I know the safest way to get there? Some ways are not going to be safe. Some areas are going to have a really tough time.
There's going to be a point in time that you may need to leave your house, and you're going to always want to be thinking about where is that next place going to be, and without the use of an automobile, what route would I take to get there? Bicycle is probably going to be your best thing. It might be on foot, but how will I get there in the least conspicuous way possible? But maybe it's traveling at night. Maybe there's certain back roads, or you're cutting through things. Strange things to consider, but this would be a very strange event, and better to have thought that out now than do it on the fly in the moment.
And I forgot, I was just looking down at my watch, and I wore these two specifically.
I was wondering about that.
One is going to not work in the event of an EMP, and the other one will. The other one I specifically bought actually just a few weeks ago. It's a mechanical watch. I have to wind it. And my son's like, well, why would you want to do that? I said that's the way watches used to be. And, you had to wind them. And so if you stopped winding it, it would stop. I was like, yeah, well, then you wouldn't know what time it is. I know. And that's, in the event of an EMP, it really kind of gets lost. And so the number of people that are going to have watches that are useful are going to be limited. But if you and your network of your community have some watches, you at least have some frames of reference. If you say, hey, let's meet over there at noon. Well, when's noon? Well, noon, is the sun yet? Is it there yet? How close are we? We don't know how to read the time from the sun like they used to decades, centuries ago. So paying $20 or digging out that old watch that you haven't used in years, maybe a good time to do it. I'm going to take it off now. Thank you. But having a bug out, that's the other thing too. Last thing I want to mention in terms of points was bug out bags. There's a time in a season when you decide that, you know what, it's no longer safe. We live in South Florida. It's congested. Having a place to go, having a plan for how to get there, there may come a time that you may decide that you need to do that. And in some cases, it may be that, you know what, I live in a certain part of town, and that part of town is not going to be safe, and so you're going to move, and you're going to come over here. Maybe that's safer. So things like that. Darlene.
What about the flashlight on your phone? Do you think that will be cause and effect of the EMP?
Basically, with the EMP, the entire phone will stop working. It will be a doorstop.
Quick reference, she brought up a good point. A lot of flashlights have LEDs as their element. So when you want a flashlight, you really need to get one with a filament bulb because your LED is a diode junction, which is the very thing that gets fried in phones, any electronic.
So the whole phone won't even turn on, to answer your question, okay, in the event of that. And to Dave's point about LED for the recording, LEDs have a diode there, so they will not work unless they're protected in a Faraday cage. So the beautiful thing about LEDs is they're incredibly low power consumption, but the risky thing is they are very susceptible to these electromagnetic pulse. Yeah.
One more thing. What's your thoughts of a dryer as a Faraday cage for in the parking complex?
Yeah, great question. And a lot of people have come up with different ideas. Like some people, you'll read online and people say, some of the examples that people use as Faraday cages. Microwave. What was the question? Okay, so the question was, what do I think of a dryer as a potential Faraday cage? Now, I'm going to back up and just say, there are a lot of things on the internet that they'll say, here's potential Faraday cages. They'll say microwave, dryer, refrigerator, and one other one that's, safe, okay? Like a metal safe. Here's the problem. Unless there is a metal-to-metal connection, the entire, all the way around, it won't work. Now, one way that you can test these Faraday cages, the first way, the easiest way to test, this one must be yours because it's dead.
Probably is.
All right. Let me see here. Okay. We've got radio signal. All right. I put it in here. It starts to lose signal. No signal. No signal. And that's telling you that it's effective, okay? There's no signal. If you were to do the same thing and put this in a microwave, you'd still hear the signal of the radio. If you put it in the fridge, it would be a reduced signal, but you would still hear the signal because the fridge has a rubber gasket that closes it. The dryer, it's the same thing, that unless it's an old dryer that you've retrofitted and you somehow created a perfect seal, you're gonna have the same problem. The safe, is gonna have the same problem. Unless you take the safe and you wrap it in foil, you're gonna still have problems, okay? So I think the best and easiest is this. If you just need a small one, get an ammo can. I mean, honestly, if you wanna go really cheap, let's just say you have one of these radios and you wanna just have the radio. Take the antenna off, set it aside, wrap the thing in this either bubble wrap or some kind of foam. You wrap it in foam and then wrap it in foil, okay? And as long as the foil is completely tight, you're good. There's something protecting it from the foil, and then the foil completely surrounds it, this thing then would be protected. The challenge is that when you're talking about these things is that if you have to regularly open them and get to them, you're taking the foil off, and then the result is it weakens the connection. And then it weakens the chance that you don't have a complete connection. Other questions? Yes. Yes, a cookie tin. Remember, the same thing. As long as you've got metal-to-metal connection all the way through, cookie tin is good, and then you line it with something that's non-conductive. You know, I like the foam or the... Uh-huh. That's a great point. So she mentions that taking walking shoes with you regularly or switching out the shoes, because as things sit in the car, they do deteriorate. And the last thing is when you need them in a crunch, you realize that that sole was in danger. Anybody else? Yes. No, so electromagnetic, it's an electromagnetic wave, and so it won't, and it's only seconds. I mean, it's nanoseconds and then milliseconds for the E2, and then just a few seconds for the E3. So there won't be any effect on those things. Yeah. Okay, so she's mentioning saving the seeds because you can propagate, especially heirloom vegetables. The seeds are good. A lot of the stuff that we eat today is hybrid stuff, and so those seeds won't necessarily work. So having seeds is good. She mentioned peppermint oil on cotton balls and putting those in things as a deterrent for mice. Mice will eat. If they're hungry enough, they will eat through that plastic of that 5-gallon bucket. So that's part of the reason too that you put them in Mylar bags, and you want to inspect them every so often. So somebody was asking about like the wheat berries. I've heard of people actually not doing any protection and just storing wheat berries in a metal garbage can. Okay, and they just seal it up. They just put the lid on, and I mean the mice ain't going to eat through that. Okay. As long as there's no moisture inside, those wheat berries will stay a long time. We live in Florida, so you have to figure out, some of those things. But so lots of different alternatives. Other questions or contributions? Something that what was something that you discovered that for hurricane prep or EMP prep like really makes sense, like having this on hand? Sorry. So a clean, new black garbage can.
Filled with water and keep it outside in the sun. And you can use it for washing yourself, and it's not cold.
And it'll be hot water. Okay. Yep. Great. Somebody else.
Same premise. You can lay out your hose in the sun all day and have hot water for a while.
There you go. The one thing to be careful of, the hose, the material that's in there, the whatever, it's not great to, like if that's the only water you were to drink, it's not great, especially because it's been sitting in the hose. But for hot water that you need for for washing and stuff, that's good. Just be careful too, because it can be scalding. It can get like a couple hundred degrees.
Dr. Arthur that you're talking about, he makes a thing called broadband ferrites, and I don't know how good they work, but you could try them on your refrigerator, and it might help if you get EMP.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So he's the last book that was mentioned on your handout, and so his website. Do you remember what the name of the website? Disasterprepper.com. And he mentions all sorts of stuff. He's studied this, and he's I don't know what engineer or whatever, but he says that he's got these things, these ferrite magnets that you can put on, and that basically somehow are going to neutralize the blast. Okay, and so he suggests that there's a way that you can even do it for your whole house. But you could, the main key things that you want to think about, like the refrigerator, those things that you really rely on. When it comes to food, man, imagine not having refrigeration. What would you do if you don't have refrigeration? I mean, so much of our life goes back to that, so much of what we do in our planning for food. So thinking through those things and looking into those things. I mean, for a couple $100, probably wouldn't be a bad idea as an insurance investment.
He has some for your car battery too, for your car.
Yes, so he has them for the car battery that you can put on in hopes that that might help the car. So there's different ones that he goes through. Like I said, he started to explain it to me, and I was tired and falling asleep, and I was like, okay, I'll have to look at this another time. But it is another resource. Thanks.
Yeah, all these things are pretty good, but I've resigned in my heart that I need to find a way to live without any type of electricity or these devices. And, you know, if these things work and I can get a couple of these things, cool, you know. But really settle in yourself and think about, how am I going to live without any of these things? And just, I think that's the best way to go into it. Yes.
Also, another book I didn't have on the list that I wanted to. It's called When All Plans Fail. This guy's Paul Williams. He's a doctor, and he's one of these doctors that when a hurricane hits, he's flying in and he's helping. When there's a disaster, when there's an earthquake, a huge tsunami in Indonesia, he's the guy. He's a doctor, he's a Christian, that he's there on the ground. Excellent book, and he just kind of spells things out, like how to prepare. And his whole thing is, don't prepare for the things that's like, you know, for example, how do I prepare for an asteroid hitting Florida? It could happen, okay? But it's basically, Jesus beam me up. That's the plan. But some people are like, oh, I'm worried about that. Prepare. He makes a great illustration. If you're out riding, or you're out in a field, and you suddenly hear hoof beats behind you, do you immediately think of zebras? No. No, you think of horses, okay? And especially here in close to Wellington, that's what you're going to think of. So prepare in the same way. Prepare for what's most likely to happen first, and then you can prepare for the zebras, okay? Yes.
Well, wouldn't it be a good idea to have some extra salt to keep things from going bad?
Okay, so salt, the question is about having extra salt. Yes, it's good to have extra salt. The interesting thing is the salt that you get at the store, the iodized salt that's so granular, that's not the same type of salt that your parents, your great-grandparents used to preserve their food. And so I went and bought a bunch of that, and I still have a bunch of it because there's nothing to use it for. So it's other types of salt that they would use, which is actually a little bit coarser grain. You have to research it. I haven't done the research on it. What's that? Coarser. I know you say kosher. I'm saying coarser. I'm not sure. You have to look into it, though. In terms of preservation, that's one of those things that you want to have. You want to have done some research. Throw those PDFs into a folder and have that folder. Even if you just don't have an extra phone, put them on a flash drive that you can somehow access in the event. And then the result is you'll be able to pull up the thing to tell you how to do it. You got to have the supplies on hand, but like, you know, canning, for example. I don't need to know how to can if I have all the supplies to can, and then the event happens, I'm like, okay, I pull up my PDF or I pull up my book on canning, and now I'm going to become an expert because I have to.
I was wondering about a Seminole pumpkin.
Seminole pumpkin, what about it?
What do you do with it? Does it taste like pumpkin? Oh, no wonder your voice is so...
I hate pumpkin. I hate pumpkin pie. I hate everything pumpkin. These don't taste like pumpkins. They taste more like a butternut squash. They're delicious, actually. So we cooked some of these, and I was apprehensive. We ate all of it. I ate every last bit of it. They're sweet. When you cut into it, actually almost smells like a watermelon. We were surprised. It kind of had like a watermelon smell to it, and they were absolutely delicious. We just cut it in half. We threw it in the oven. I mean, I'm sure any type of heat at a long enough time, it would break down, and they were great. And the thing about these pumpkins, I'm all excited about these now. We just discovered them, but almost every part of it's edible. The flowers are edible. the young vines, and leaves are edible. You have seeds. Yes, yeah, ton of seeds, and we just we started growing some more, and they're perennials. They actually grow year round, so you can keep these things going inevitably.
Seminole pumpkin.
Yeah. Although if you need a couple, let me know. We'll get you some. Yes.
All right. Other questions? Did you have one?
You know, one thing we didn't talk about was the bob bags, right? Bug out bags.
Yeah. So, well, we talked about bugging out, and
Yeah.
and
But the idea is you keep, you know, I have 6 people in my family. We have 6 bags that are already packed that have the life straw in it, some bars. My wife packed them all. I forget what's in there, but basically enough for each person to head out and be able to make it for a couple days with what's in the bag, that you're not scrambling to all of a sudden find the things and where's this and where's that. The bags are there. That's yours. Put it on your back and you go. So it's all, you're ready to go in an instant.
yeah, and there's a lot of different reasons you might bug out. It may not be an EMP. It may be like, civil unrest. And like, we're getting out of here. And I keep a bug out bag whenever we travel. Like if we go to Orlando, I have a bug home bag, and I've got that in my car along with my little Faraday cage. But my bug home bag is in the event that I'm out somewhere, I know I have the materials that I need to get home. I've got a little bit of food, I got a little bit of water or a life straw, and I've got shoes. I've got some security, whatever. Other questions or thoughts? Other things that you've thought about that would be helpful to somebody that's trying to prepare for either hurricane or EMP? The previous YouTube? So the YouTube links well, there's a website. If you go to revealfellowship.com/EMPs, the links, we'll have the links for the videos that we showed. The one, I don't, actually, do you have those there, Katie? Okay. Oh, okay, yeah, the one that we did on that one, is that on
the first one?
The very first one that we did. If you're part of our preparedness, we do one monthly, and number one. Number two, there is an online Facebook group. I encourage you to join that. From that, there's actually even from our website. I can't remember, what's the link for our website? /revealfellowship.com/prepared, and there's a link to all of the previous seminars, and so you can go back in there and see that. The Facebook group, they have some good discussions. It'll be interesting because people talk about firearms, or they'll talk about different preparedness websites that's been very useful for them.
Also, come see me if you have any questions. I don't claim to be an expert, but I'll tell you what I know and what we've done and how to do it.
Okay. Any other questions? Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. So, in terms of the radios, this guy right here is the guy to talk to. All right. Raise your hand, Dave. He is the expert. He's a ham operator, and he can tell you all the ins and outs. Basically, if you buy the Walmart special 2-pack, it's going to go from here to a block away. Okay, and that's good for a block, and that's about it here in South Florida. These that we got are between 5 watt and 8 watt, and that's going to give you a much larger distance. And then if you add that extended antenna, you get even larger. Okay, and so you can get them relatively cheap, $25 to $60 on Amazon, depending on how much you want and any features. So there is a little bit of a learning curve. We did a seminar on that. There were some challenges with the recording on that. Is that, Katie, is that recording on that preparedness site or not? No, it's not. There were some technical difficulties, not EMP related, but close. So, but I encourage everyone to get one of those radios and then just learn the basics of that, and you can talk to Dave about more details. Is that okay, Dave? Well, you can use the FRMS channels. There are certain channels that you can use regardless, to 24, 25? Up to 24. Channels 1 through 24 you can use without a license. Beyond that, especially if you buy the more powerful radios, then you're getting into the ham, and you have to have, there's certain licenses you can get. Some of them you just pay a fee, and you're good. Some of them you have to take a test. So it depends on your level of expertise that you're wanting to pursue. I would encourage everyone just to have the basic, and then know how to, if nothing else, download the PDF, print it out so that when you're ready and you actually, okay, now what do I do with this thing? I've got the manual and I can figure it out at that point. All right? Let's pray. God, we thank you once again that you're in control, and we choose not to operate in fear but operate in faith. And so, Lord, may from what we discussed today, may you just give each of us one action step that we could do this week. Something maybe that we need to purchase, or a change that we need to make in our life, or a phone call even that we need to make. May you lead and direct us. God, may we not give into fear. May this not be anything that people take and really panic about, because ultimately your perfect love casts out fear. And so, Lord, we walk in your love. We sit in your love, and we have peace. And so now may that peace rule our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Amen. If you're interested in looking at the Faraday cages or the books, come on up, take a look. If you want to pick our brains, there's not much there, but you're welcome to do that as well.
Or if you want some of these Seminole pumpkin seeds, I'll go cut this one open, and you guys can get a couple seeds now. And if you want to take some of it home to try it, you're more than welcome.
Sacrifice for you, you're a fire.